Naira had spent 24 years believing the sea hated her. She'd believed it every time her skin refused to look like her sister's golden perfection, every time her white salt hair caught stares instead of compliments, every time the rain dock scent rose around her during moments of stress, and people wrinkled their noses in disgust. She'd believed it through childhood feasts where she sat at the furthest table, through adolescence when painters sighed that her tide-marked complexion wouldn't hold pigment properly, through the endless whispers of "drowned girl" that followed her like gulls trailing a fishing boat. The sea had marked her cruelly, everyone said. The salt sign was no blessing. It was rejection wrapped in prophecy, a warning that this air would never be right for Breeze Mist's shining throne. And Naira believed them. Why wouldn't she? Her own mirror showed the proof. Gray pearl skin that never looked quite dry, veins like blue river maps pulsing at her temples, hair that carried salt even when she bathed in fresh water. The palace gardeners complained her presence made their flowers bloom out of season. Fishermen crossed themselves when she passed their boats. She was the wrong princess in the right kingdom, too strange for celebration, too royal to ignore. That morning, dressed in pale green silk that made her look like a storm cloud someone had tried to dress for a garden party, Naira stood at the edge of the grand square for the tide oath ceremony. Her sister Gaia glittered beside her, honey-haired and perfect, every inch the jewel of breeze mist the court adored. Naira felt like the shadow Gaia cast. She believed she belonged there, watching from the margins while others shone. But as the High Herald began the ancient words and the incense thickened, Naira felt something shift beneath the stones. Not anger, not punishment. Hunger. The sea wasn't rejecting her. It was waiting. And when her sister turned to the crowd with that beautiful, practiced smile and declared, "Look well at your heir," the princess with the skin of something the tide dragged up and decided not to keep, Naira had no idea that those words would be the last cruelty the kingdom would ever dare speak against her. She had no idea that wolves would rise from the edges of the square, that an alpha king would see past the lies to the vow glowing beneath her skin, that the thing everyone called curse would bloom into gold and power before their eyes. All Naira felt, standing there with her heart hammering and shame burning her cheeks, was the sudden, impossible certainty that the sea had never hated her at all. If you love intense stories about wolves, with destiny and twists and turns, subscribe to the channel now. We post videos every day, so subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any episodes. How about we get to know each other better? I'm Maggie Reed, author of the stories. And you? Comment below with your name and which city you're watching from. The first time Lady Gaia smiled at Naira that afternoon, it looked like kindness. The second time, it looked like a trap. The palace square of breeze mist spread wide as a tide flat at low water, packed with bodies and expectation. Salt wind worried at banners overhead, making them snap and flutter like restless seabirds. Incense burned in bronze bowls along the dais, rosemary and myrrh and something sweeter meant to suggest blessing. But the sweetness couldn't hide the truth underneath. Fear had a smell, too. Sharp as cold iron, thin as a storm line on the horizon. Naira stood on the lowest step of the dais, where the crowd could see her clearly, and the court could pretend she belonged there without actually letting her stand among them. Her hands were folded at her waist, fingers interlaced tight enough to make her knuckles ache. It was the only way she knew to keep herself from reaching up and tugging her sleeves down, as if fabric could cover what the kingdom insisted was wrong with her. Her skin held that gray pearl sheen even in daylight, as if the sea had left a wet fingerprint on her. At her temples and wrists, blue veins traced delicate lines like tiny river maps. And when her nerves rose, when her heart sped and shame heated her face, the air around her carried a scent like rain hitting the dock planks. It had always happened. As long as she could remember, the sea remembered her back. Pearls had been pinned into her white salt hair until her scalp felt tender. The court tailors had chosen a dress in pale green to make her look softer, as if color could convince people to unsee what they'd already decided. The cloth brushed her wrists with every small movement, and she focused on that sensation. Cloth, breath, stone beneath her shoes, like a person counting steps across thin ice. Behind her, an attendant leaned close, voice tight with practiced cheer. "Smile, Your Highness, like you're honored." Naira tried. The smile came out fragile. Across the square, the High Herald held a scroll with hands that trembled just slightly, though his face remained serene. Breeze Mist loved ceremonies the way some people loved storms, as something to endure together while pretending it was beautiful. On the far side of the dais, a small gilded pen had been set up for the castle hens, decorated with ribbons and a ridiculous little crest. Tradition, apparently, demanded their presence during the tide oath, because the old stories said hens could sense the sea's moods before sailors ever could. Naira didn't know about prophecy. She only knew the hens were always right about when it would rain. From the pen came one sharp cluck, scandalized and clear in her mind as if it had been spoken in her ear. "If anyone tries to make you cry, I'm pecking ankles. I don't care whose." Naira's throat tightened. A laugh almost slipped out. Small, surprised, alive, before she swallowed it down. Not here. Not now. She kept her gaze forward on the space just above the crowd's heads, the way she'd learned as a child when people stared too hard. Don't meet their eyes. Don't invite their opinions to get louder. The drums began, slow and heavy. The sound echoed against palace stone and rolled out toward the cliffs like a heartbeat trying to steady itself. "People of Breeze Mist," the herald called, and his voice carried with the wind. "Today we honor the tide oath. Today we honor the salt sign." The words landed in Naira's chest like cold coin. The salt sign, the signal dusal. The presage people whispered about when they thought she couldn't hear. The thing they feared like a curse, right up until they needed it to feel safe. Naira had never seen a mark on her own body. No symbol, no brand. Only skin that refused to look like anyone else's, and a strange pull in her bones whenever the tide changed, as if the ocean had tied a knot in her and refused to untie it. Then Lady Gaia stepped forward. She didn't walk. She glided, every movement practiced, every pause timed to let admiration bloom. Golden skin, honey hair, eyes bright as sunlight on calm water. Her gown, coral pale and perfect, caught the light like she'd been made for applause. The jewel of Breeze Mist, the kingdom's favorite daughter. Naira felt the crowd's attention shift toward Gaia like a wave drawn by the moon. Their murmurs softened into that particular kind of sound people made when they looked at something they wanted to believe in. Gaia took her place near the herald, then turned, slowly, and looked down at Naira as if noticing her for the first time. "Sister," Gaia said, voice sweet as sugared fruit. "Gaia?" Naira answered. Her own voice sounded smaller than she meant it to. Gaia's smile widened. "Isn't it beautiful?" She gestured past the square, past the palace walls, to the hard line of cliffs and the wide ocean beyond. The sea glittered under a thin wash of cloud, restless but contained, like a creature pretending not to be a creature. "Our kingdom, our traditions, our people," Naira said, because that was what was expected of her. Because if she said something wrong, the wrongness would become the story, the way it always did. "Yes," Gaia agreed, and something sharpened behind her words. "Our people, watching so closely." Naira's stomach tightened. The air seemed to lean closer, as if the square itself wanted to listen. Gaia stepped nearer, lifting a hand toward Naira's hair. The gesture looked intimate, sisterly, careful, like she was about to fix a pearl pin that had slipped. Her fingers hovered without touching. That's when Naira understood. The gesture wasn't comfort. It was framing. Like Gaia wanted the crowd to see Naira as a thing being adjusted, arranged, made presentable for public tolerance. "Look at her," Gaia said, voice ringing clear. "Look well." The air of Breeze Mist. A ripple of murmurs spread through the square. Naira felt heat rise in her cheeks, and with it the scent of rain on dock, faint but unmistakable. Her heart sped, each beat a little louder in her ears. Gaia's smile did not falter. The princess with the skin of something the tide left behind. For one stunned heartbeat, the world went quiet in Naira's head. She could still hear the drums, the wind, a distant gull's cry. But inside her, something had gone weightless, as if her insides were bracing for impact. She'd heard worse in whispers. She'd been called tideskin and drowned and bad omen by children who learned cruelty early, and by adults who pretended it was concern. But this was her sister saying it like a joke the kingdom had been waiting years to laugh at. Naira's hands clenched tighter at her waist. Don't cry. Don't shake. Don't give them a spectacle. The crowd reacted the way crowds always did when given permission. A swell of sound, startled laughter from some, discomfort from others, curiosity like a finger pressing on a bruise. Naira saw a fisherman's wife cover her mouth, eyes soft with pity. She saw a nobleman's son grin, delighted at the performance. She saw the herald's jaw tense, but he didn't stop it. Gaia's eyes shone with triumph. Naira lifted her chin anyway, because if she didn't, she would disappear inside herself, and she'd spent her whole life being asked to do exactly that. I think we should be honest today, Gaia continued, voice like velvet drawn over a blade. Breezemist deserves honesty. Honesty. Naira tasted salt on her tongue, and realized she'd bitten the inside of her cheek. Then the rhythm of the square changed. Not because of a shout or a bell, because of presence. At the far edge of the crowd, near the path that led toward the cliff road, a wolf stood watching. Massive, gray, eyes bright as moonlight on deep water. It didn't bare teeth. It didn't snarl. It simply looked at Naira as if it had been looking for her. And then it sat. A collective flinch ran through the crowd. People stepped back without meaning to, making space the way humans did when the wild reminded them it had teeth. Even when those teeth were not being shown, a second wolf appeared, then a third, quiet shapes slipping through the edge of the square as if stone and body and fear all parted for them. They circled Naira and sat around the dais steps, forming a calm ring of fur and watchful eyes. They were not threatening. They were reverent. Naira's breath caught. She could feel them the way she felt tides, not as thoughts exactly, but as truth. Recognition, respect, a steady assurance that made her spine straighten without her permission. One wolf's voice brushed her mind, low, dry, strangely amused. Sit tall, Tide Girl. Let them learn what it looks like when the sea refuses to be ashamed. Naira blinked. A tremor ran through her, not fear, relief so sharp it almost hurt. The wolves were here. They'd come to her before, in the woods beyond the orchard, padding alongside her like silent guardians, but never here, never in front of everyone, never in a way that would force the kingdom to see what it had tried not to see. Gaia's laugh sounded brittle. Oh, she said lightly, spreading her hands. How charming. Even the beasts are confused by her. Confused. That was the story Gaia wanted. Naira wasn't chosen. Naira was a mistake the world made and couldn't undo. A wrong thing that drew wrong things. But the wolves didn't feel confused. They felt certain. Naira's rain scent thickened, the air cooling around her as if a storm had shifted closer. And then a new scent cut through incense and sea wind alike. Cedar, cold air, and the clean metallic edge of a coming storm. Naira turned her head. A man stood near the front of the square, half shadowed by a banner pole as if he'd been there all along and only now allowed himself to be noticed. Tall, broad-shouldered without trying, dark hair pulled back at the nape. His eyes were the color of deep water under cloud cover, calm, heavy, and not fooled by theater. The crowd inhaled as one. "Your Majesty," the herald said, voice suddenly too thin for the moment. The Alpha King, a visiting ruler of wolves, legend wrapped in flesh, rumor wearing a face. Naira's skin prickled. The wolves rose, not aggressive, simply making room, as if they were acknowledging someone they already considered part of the same truth. Lady Gaia's expression brightened into polished delight. "Your Majesty," she purred. "What an honor. Breezemist welcomes you." The Alpha King didn't look at her. He walked toward Naira, each step unhurried, deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world and intended to use it. The crowd parted instinctively, making a path without being asked. Power did that. It bent space. Naira couldn't move. Her feet felt rooted to stone. When he stopped in front of her, close enough that the warmth of him touched the cool dampness that clung to her skin, Naira drew in a shallow breath and caught more of his scent. Cedar. Storm. And beneath it, something steady and patient, like a hand held out in the dark. His voice was low, meant for her, but it carried anyway because silence had taken the square by the throat. "They're not confused," he said. Gaia's smile faltered, just a fraction. "I'm sorry?" The Alpha King's gaze shifted to Gaia at last. Not angry, not cruel, just precise, like a blade that didn't need to swing hard to cut. "Your humiliation was staged," he said calmly, "and you chose the wrong stage." A sound went through the crowd, shock shaped like air. Gaia laughed too brightly. "That's absurd. I was simply speaking honestly. You were trying to make your sister small enough to fit inside your shadow." The Alpha King finished, and his tone stayed even, almost gentle. "But you didn't account for what recognizes her." Naira's throat tightened so hard it ached. Nobody spoke like that about her. Not in her defense. Not in public. Not as if her dignity was something worth protecting. The Alpha King turned back to Naira, and suddenly the world narrowed until it was just her and him, and the space between them full of salt and storm. "You've been trained to apologize for existing," he said softly, and the words weren't pity. They were understanding. "I'm not asking for an apology." Naira swallowed. The rain scent around her trembled. "Then what are you asking for?" He held her gaze like he wasn't afraid of what he might find there. "I'm asking you to be chosen," he said. Naira's breath stopped. Chosen. Not tolerated. Not hidden. Not dragged onto a dais like a ceremonial burden. Chosen. Gaia's voice sharpened. "Your Majesty, she is a bad omen. She reeks of the sea like rain before the dock lights up." The Alpha King interrupted, and there was something almost reverent in his tone. "Like home." Naira's eyes stung. From the hen pen came one single cluck, crisp and satisfied in her mind. Finally, a man with functioning instincts. Naira almost laughed again. Almost. Because even now, on the edge of something terrifyingly big, the world insisted on being ridiculous in small ways. The Alpha King lifted his hand, palm open, offering. Not a command, not an expectation. An invitation. Naira stared at his hand as if it might vanish. Her own fingers trembled. She could hear her heart, and beneath it, the strange, steady thrum of the wolf's calm. She could feel the crowd's attention like heat on her skin. She could feel Gaia's fury like a knife pressed near, waiting for the moment to cut deeper. The Alpha King's voice lowered, meant only for Naira now. "May I?" he asked, indicating her hand. "Consent. Even here. Even now." Naira's fingers loosened. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. Their skin touched, and warmth spread through Naira as if someone had lit a lantern inside her. Her tide-cool dampness turned honeyed, amber warmth blooming outward from their joined hands. The blue vein river maps at her wrists shimmered, not fading, not hiding, transforming into delicate gold threads that caught daylight like spun sunlight. A gasp went through the square. Naira stared at her own hand in his, throat working. What is happening?" The Alpha King's thumb brushed lightly over her knuckles, so careful it felt like a promise rather than a claim. "The salt sign," he murmured. "It's not a curse." The wind shifted. The scent around Naira turned sweeter. Salt and rain and something new. Like honey warmed on stone. Her hair, still white salt, caught the light differently now, as if pale strands held faint gold at their edges. The wolves lowered their heads, not to him, to her. Naira's chest hurt with the sudden, impossible urge to believe she wasn't wrong, that the thing they'd called ugly had been sacred all along, and Breeze Mist had simply lacked the courage to name it properly. Gaia's face tightened, her perfect composure cracking at the edges. "This is a trick," she hissed, too low for most to hear. You don't get to—" The Alpha King looked at her again, and his calmness was somehow more frightening than rage would have been. "I choose what I recognize," he said, And I recognize her. Naira's breath shook on the way out. The palace bells began to ring. One, then another, then all at once. So sudden the sound startled the gulls from the roofline. The ringing filled the square like a waking, like the kingdom itself had sat up and realized something it couldn't unlearn. Naira looked down at their joined hands, still warm, still glowing faintly. Then she looked at the Alpha King and saw it. Not possession, not conquest, devotion, carefully contained, like a storm held behind closed doors until it was safe to let it out. He leaned closer, voice for her alone. "Come with me," he said, simple as breath. "Not because anyone demands it. Because you decide it." Naira's pulse hammered. The crowd watched. The wolves waited, silent as old oaths. And above the rising bell song, the High Herald's scroll slipped in his hands, as if even paper had forgotten how to behave. Naira opened her mouth to answer, and Lady Gaia stepped forward fast enough to make Silk whisper, eyes bright with panic. "Sister," Gaia said loudly, sweet again, too sweet. Tell them you don't want this." Naira froze, because suddenly she understood the real humiliation Gaia had planned. Not the insult, the choice. If Naira refused the Alpha King, she would become the tide-haunted princess again, pitied, mocked, dismissed as ungrateful for a miracle. If she accepted, Gaia would call it manipulation and whisper that Naira had bewitched him with her curse. Either way, Gaia had meant to own the story. Naira's fingers tightened around the Alpha King's hand. Warmth pulsed through her, steady and certain. For the first time in her life, she didn't look away from the crowd. For the first time, she didn't shrink. And when Naira finally spoke, her voice carried the scent of rain and the sound of a tide that had decided it was done, receding. "I want," she began. The Alpha King's gaze held hers, unwavering. Naira inhaled, and the bells kept ringing, as if the kingdom itself was bracing for what she would choose next. Naira's voice almost failed her on the last inch of the sentence. "I want," she began again, and the word caught behind her teeth like a hook. The bells kept ringing. The wind kept pulling at banners. 1,000 faces kept staring as if their eyes could force her into the story they preferred. She felt Lady Gaia's gaze like heat against the side of her face, sweet on the surface, frantic underneath. A pleading performance meant for the crowd, not for Naira. And then there was the Alpha King's hand around hers, warm, steady, not gripping, simply present. An offered anchor. Nothing more. Naira drew a breath that tasted like salt and rain. "I want to choose," she said, and her own voice surprised her. It didn't shake. It didn't vanish. It carried. Not for you. Not for her. Not for them. She lifted her chin, letting the square see the part of her that had been hidden for years behind lowered eyes. "For me?" A murmur rolled through the crowd. Not quite approval, not quite outrage. More like the kingdom's collective mind scrambling to rearrange itself around a new shape. Lady Gaia's smile trembled at the edges. "Naira," she coaxed, soft as velvet. "Don't be dramatic. Everyone is watching." Naira looked at her sister, and for the first time, didn't flinch away from what she saw there. Not love, not concern. Possession. "I know," Naira said quietly. The Alpha King's thumb brushed once over her knuckles, a whisper of contact. Her skin warmed again in response, amber glow pulsing under the pearl gray, as if something ancient in her recognized something ancient in him. He didn't speak over her. He didn't rescue her words. He waited. Naira turned back to the crowd. "I will not be called a curse by someone who fears what she can't imitate," she said, and her chest tightened after the words left her, because she hadn't planned them, hadn't polished them, hadn't made them safe. If the sea made me, then the sea can look at me in daylight. If the kingdom wants to stare, then stare. A breathy sound escaped someone near the fountain. Shock, maybe. Admiration, maybe. Or simply the realization that a girl everyone had trained to be quiet was speaking like a cliff that refused to crumble. Lady Gaia's cheeks flushed, the first true color of anger breaking through her practiced charm. "You don't get to—" Naira held up a hand, not pleading, not apologizing, stopping. Lady Gaia froze, startled into silence the way she'd never been around Naira before. The wolves around the dais remained perfectly still, a calm ring of living certainty. Naira felt their attention like a low, steady hum beneath her ribs. Not urging, not pushing, supporting. From the gilded pen, a single hen clucked in Naira's mind with brutal satisfaction. Oh, she found her spine. Good for her. Naira swallowed the sudden, absurd sting behind her eyes and didn't let it turn into tears. The Alpha King finally spoke, voice low, carried by the hush. "Your name," he said to Naira. She blinked. Naira. He nodded once, as if locking the sound into memory. "Naira," he repeated, and her name in his mouth sounded like something that belonged in the world without being punished for it. Then, only then, he turned his gaze to the High Herald. "This ceremony is finished." The herald's hands tightened on the scroll. "Your Majesty, the Tide Oath." "The Tide Oath can wait," the Alpha King said, calm as stone. "She cannot." Naira's breath hitched, but the words didn't feel like ownership. They felt like priority. Lady Gaia tried to step forward again, quickly, as if she could wedge herself back into the center of the scene. "Your Majesty, you don't understand. My sister is unwell. She's overwhelmed. The sea scent is... It's fear," Naira said, surprising herself again. "It always has been. You just liked pretending it was something uglier." Gaia's eyes widened a fraction. Then her smile snapped back into place as if she'd stitched it there. "Naira, don't do this. Come inside. We'll talk in private." Naira almost laughed at the simplicity of it. The way Gaia thought private meant where I can control the outcome. Naira didn't move. The Alpha King shifted, angling his body slightly. Subtle, protective without being possessive. A shield made of presence rather than threat. His voice lowered, meant for Naira alone. "May I guide you away from this?" he asked. The question landed like a hand offered in the dark. Naira stared at the space between them, at the way the bells still rang as if the palace itself couldn't stop reacting to her. She could feel eyes burning holes in her back. She could feel Gaia's fury tightening like a knot. She could also feel, beneath it all, a strange relief. A widening inside her chest where shame used to live. "Yes," Naira whispered. "Please." He didn't pull her. He didn't hurry her. He simply stepped down first, so she could follow without feeling like she was being dragged from her own life. His hand stayed around hers, not tight, not claiming, just there, steady as a lighthouse beam. The wolves rose and moved with them, not crowding, not causing panic. They flowed like a quiet boundary that made the crowd step back without anyone needing to shout. Naira walked through the parting sea of people and felt, for the first time, what it was like to be looked at without being swallowed. Some faces held confusion. Some held fear. Some held something like hope. She caught a fisherman's wife pressing fingers to her lips as if holding back a cheer. A little boy stared at Naira with wide eyes, and when Naira glanced at him, he lifted his hand in a small, shaky wave. Naira's throat tightened around something that wasn't grief this time. It was recognition. They reached the palace archway, the shadowed mouth that led into cool corridors and quieter air. The bells softened behind them, still ringing, but muffled now by stone. The moment Naira stepped under the arch, the scent of incense fell away and the castle's familiar smells rushed in: wax, polished wood, sea-damp stone, and the faint ghost of lemon oil from endless cleaning. Naira exhaled too fast, like she'd been holding her breath for years and only just remembered she was allowed to let it go. The Alpha King slowed. "Are you steady?" he asked. Naira nodded, then immediately shook her head. No. His mouth twitched. Not amusement at her weakness, but a quiet appreciation of her honesty. "Good answer," he said. "We'll work with no." Naira blinked. "Work with it? As if it's not shameful," he said simply. Her chest tightened hard. She looked away, because if she didn't, her eyes would betray her. They moved down a side corridor lined with sea glass windows. Outside, the ocean flashed silver. Inside, the air cooled, and Naira's rain scent faded to a softer hush, like a storm that had decided it didn't need to prove itself anymore. A court servant appeared at the end of the hall, started toward them, then stopped short when he saw who walked beside Naira. His eyes widened, and he bowed so low he nearly folded in half. "Your Majesty," he breathed. The Alpha King nodded once, minimal, then kept walking as if ceremony was a thing he wore when required but didn't keep on at home. Naira realized abruptly how tired she was. Not sleepy tired, bone tired. The kind of exhaustion that came from spending a lifetime bracing for the next insult. Her knees softened. She caught herself, barely. The Alpha King noticed immediately. His hand tightened, not squeezing, simply ensuring she didn't fall. "We're close," he said. Close to what? Naira wondered. He led her to a small receiving room tucked behind a tapestry of crashing waves. It wasn't grand. It wasn't one of the rooms Breezemist used to impress visiting dignitaries. It felt forgotten, safe in its neglect. A fire burned low in the hearth, making the room smell like warm cedar and smoke that didn't sting. A couch sat near a table with a chipped teapot, plain, like it had been used by someone who valued warmth over appearances. Naira stopped in the doorway, startled. "This room," she whispered. "It's real. It's mine," the Alpha King said. "When I visit." He glanced at her, gauging, careful. "Sit, if you can." Naira sat. The couch dipped under her, and the simple softness felt like a luxury. The wolves flowed in behind them, then settled near the door and the hearth like living sentries. One rested its head on its paws and looked at Naira as if to say, "We're not leaving you in here alone with your thoughts." Naira's throat tightened again, sharper this time. The Alpha King remained standing for a moment, as if keeping distance on purpose, giving her room to breathe, to decide if she wanted him close. Then he moved to the table and poured water into a cup from a pitcher. The action was ordinary, grounding. He brought the cup to her with both hands, respectful as a ritual. "Drink," he said. Naira took it. Her fingers were still trembling, but the cup was warm enough to make her feel like she existed in the same world as comfort. She sipped. The Alpha King sat across from her, not too near. "My name is Saurin," he said. "Saurin Vale." Naira swallowed. "Saurin." He nodded. "I came to Breezemist because I heard the sea was restless around your cliffs." Naira's mouth went dry. "It's always restless. Not like this," Saurin said quietly. "Not the way my wolves spoke of it." Naira's gaze flicked to the wolves near the hearth. Their eyes watched her with the calm patience of creatures who knew exactly how long it took for a scared person to stop flinching. She whispered, almost ashamed, "They listen to me." Saurin's eyes softened. "They recognize you." Naira tightened her grip on the cup. "Everyone thinks the salt sign is a curse." Saurin leaned forward slightly, voice low. "The salt sign is a vow," he said. "A promise older than any crown made of metal." He paused, choosing words that wouldn't drown her. "In my lands, we tell a story. Not of a cursed girl, of a tide heir. Someone the sea marks so the living world doesn't forget its own balance." Naira stared at him, stunned. "You mean, you've heard of this?" "I've been looking for it," he admitted. The confession landed softly, not like a demand, but like truth he'd decided she deserved. Naira's pulse stumbled. "Why?" Saurin's gaze held hers, steady. "Because my wolves have been restless for months," he said. "Not hungry, not angry." His voice dropped. "Lonely." Naira's breath caught at the word because it fit something in her so neatly it hurt. Saurin continued, gentle but certain. "They've been waiting for something they couldn't name. And when I stepped into your square today, I felt it." He lifted his hand, not reaching for her, just showing his palm as if offering proof he had no hidden weapon in it. "When you touched me, the air changed." Naira looked down at her own hand, the one that had warmed into amber under his. The warmth still lingered faintly, like a secret. She whispered, "My skin changed." Saurin nodded. "That wasn't me forcing anything," he said quickly, as if he knew exactly where fear could go. That was your own sign waking in the open. His jaw tightened once, restrained emotion slipping through. They made you carry it in shame. They tried to make you believe it was ugly. Naira swallowed hard. It was always ugly to them. Saurin's voice softened. Not to the living world. Naira's eyes stung, and this time she didn't fight it as hard. A tear slid down her cheek, warm against skin that had spent a lifetime being called cold. She wiped it away fast, embarrassed. Saurin didn't comment on it. He didn't look away either. He simply stayed, present, as if tears were ordinary and allowed. The door creaked. Naira's spine went rigid. A matronly courtmaid peered in. Older, gray hair pinned tight. Face stern with years of managing chaos. Her gaze landed on Naira, then on Saurin, then on the wolves, and something unreadable flickered across her expression. She dipped a curtsy. "Your Majesty," she said, then turned to Naira with a gentleness that surprised Naira more than any insult ever could. "Your Highness, your sister is requesting an audience." Naira's stomach twisted. Saurin's voice remained calm. "She can wait." The maid hesitated. "She says it's urgent." Naira heard it in her mind before anyone spoke. The faint, offended cluck of the hen pen somewhere far away in the palace. Distant, but crystal clear. Urgent? She had years to be kind and chose today to be creative. Naira almost smiled through her panic, and the tiny, absurd lift of her mouth made her feel like she hadn't lost herself completely. Then fear returned, heavy and familiar. Gaia wouldn't come without a plan. Naira set the cup down carefully, as if steadiness could be borrowed from the table. "If I don't go," she said softly, mostly to herself, "she'll make the story without me." Saurin watched her, eyes intent. "And if you do go," Naira's voice turned thin, "she'll try to make me small again." Saurin didn't argue. He didn't promise that the world would be fair. He asked, "Do you want me with you?" The question made Naira's throat tighten. Not "do you need me?" Not "I'm coming." Want? Choice. Naira inhaled, tasting cedar smoke and rain memory. She felt the wolves watching. She felt, somewhere deep in her bones, the sea shifting, awake. "Yes," she said, and her voice held. "I do." Saurin stood, offering his hand again. An invitation, not a leash. Naira took it. The moment their skin met, a soft warmth pulsed through her, steadying her knees. The wolves rose with them, silent as vows. Naira stepped toward the door, and in the corridor beyond, she caught the first hint of Gaia's perfume. Citrus and flowers, too sweet to be honest, drifting closer like a tide that had learned how to wear silk. Naira's heart kicked hard, because whatever Gaia had planned next, it was coming. And this time, Naira would meet it with her head up. Lady Gaia was waiting in the side gallery like she owned the light. Sun poured through the high sea glass windows, casting shifting green patterns on the floor. Gaia had chosen the spot perfectly, where the colors made her look like a painting and everyone else like a smudge. Naira felt Saurin's hand around hers as they approached, warm and calm, a steady line leading her forward. On either side of them, two wolves padded silently, their claws soft against the stone. Gaia saw them, and, for the briefest moment, something ugly flashed through her expression. Then the smile snapped into place. "Sister," she said, gliding forward. "Your Majesty." "How dramatic of you both." Naira almost flinched at the way Gaia said sister, like it was a word she'd borrowed for the afternoon and planned to return slightly damaged. Saurin inclined his head, polite but not deferential. "Lady Gaia, you vanished from the square," Gaia continued, hand fluttering to her chest as if she were the one struggling to breathe. "People are confused, worried. Our kingdom has rituals for a reason." Naira's mouth went dry. "Our kingdom has people," she said quietly. "They seemed less worried about me when you called me something unburied." Gaia's eyes widened, then softened, as if she'd been the injured one. "Naira, you know I didn't mean it like that." "How?" Naira asked. "Did you mean it?" Gaia's gaze flicked to Saurin, then back, calculating. "We can't speak freely with an audience," she said, "Sweet. This is family. This is about your attempt to humiliate a crowned heir in front of her own people," Saurin said, voice even. "That's no longer just family." Naira felt Gaia's anger spike, sharp as broken glass under bare feet. Gaia ignored Saurin pointedly and focused on Naira instead. "You're shaken," she soothed. "You always take things too much to heart. Let me explain." Naira's pulse stuttered, old habits tugging at her. Nod. Agree. Apologize for existing too loudly. A wolf's voice nudged the back of her mind, dry and unimpressed. "She's circling like she thinks you're wounded. Maybe show some metaphorical teeth." Naira took a slow breath. "Explain what?" she asked. "The part where you called me a curse? Or the part where you chose a ceremony to do it because the crowd makes you brave?" Saurin's mouth twitched, so quickly she might have imagined it. Gaia's smile thinned. "Naira," she said softly, "the salt sign scares people. They don't understand it. You have to admit, you look different. I was trying to guide their reaction, to make them laugh so they wouldn't fear you." Naira stared at her. "You called me those names to make them comfortable?" "It worked," Gaia said, as if it were sensible. "They were less tense afterward. You always say you hate when people are afraid of you." Naira felt that old familiar ache spread under her ribs, where love and hurt had been wrapped together so tightly for so long she couldn't always tell them apart. Saurin spoke before she could drown in it. "If fear is the problem," he said, "you might consider not feeding it." Gaia finally turned her full attention on him, lashes lowering just enough to look demure. "Your Majesty, you come from lands where wolves bow to girls with strange skin and bells ring for accidents. Breeze Mist is different. We've had to protect ourselves for generations. People cling to what they know. Then maybe it's time they knew something better," Saurin said. Gaia's fingers curled briefly at her side, then smoothed. "You don't understand our history." Saurin's gaze held steady. "I understand what I saw," Gaia exhaled, as if heroically patient. "What you saw," she said, "was my sister overwhelmed by attention she was never prepared for. She's fragile. She always has been. Today's display," her eyes flicked to Naira's still faintly warmed skin, "has only made things worse. People will talk. They'll invent stories. They'll say she bewitched you." Naira's stomach dropped. "I didn't—" "I know," Gaia said quickly, stepping closer, taking Naira's free hand as if she had any right to it. Her grip was cool, too tight. "I know you didn't, but they'll say it. Let me fix this. Let me talk to the nobles, smooth it over. You go back to your rooms. Stay quiet. Let this settle. Stay quiet. Like a problem that would fade if it stayed politely out of sight." Naira looked down at Gaia's hand on hers, at Saurin's hand still holding her other, and realized this was the first time in her life she'd stood between two versions of care and could feel the difference so clearly. Gaia's grip said, "I will protect what I care about. My image. My control." Saurin's grip said, "I will support what you choose." Naira met Gaia's eyes. "I'm not going back to hiding," she said. Silence fell in the gallery, thick as fog. Gaia laughed, brittle. "Don't be childish. This isn't about hiding. This is about strategy. If you walk back out there holding his hand, they'll see you as chosen," Saurin said quietly. Gaia's gaze snapped to him. "As a scandal." Naira's heart thudded painfully. "Better a scandal than a ghost," she said. It was a small sentence, but for Naira, it felt like ripping open a seam she'd been stitched into for years. Saurin's eyes warmed, pride flickering there so clearly she had to look away before it burned. Gaia's expression smoothed into something like pity. "You're not thinking clearly," she said. "Of course this feels flattering. Someone finally notices you. You're vulnerable to that. But you don't know him. You don't know what being tied to an alpha king means." Naira's jaw tightened. "I know what being tied to your approval means." Gaia's face went still, a hairline crack running through her poise. Naira's voice softened, but she didn't back down. "You only love parts of me that don't get in your way. The rest you try to cut down to fit your reflection." Saurin stayed very, very quiet. Gaia blinked. You're being cruel. Naira flinched at that, guilt flooding in as easily as breath. Before it could root itself, Saurin finally spoke. Cruelty, he said, is calling your sister something unburied in front of her people. Gaia's composure snapped, just for a heartbeat. You don't get to judge our family, she hissed. You swoop in for one ceremony and suddenly think you're the sea's chosen voice? No, Saurin said calmly. She is. Naira's breath left her. Gaia stared between them, something frantic building in her eyes. They'll never accept her, she said. Not like this. Not as she is. They barely tolerated her when she stayed out of sight. If she becomes your Luna, they'll blame her for everything that goes wrong. Every bad harvest. Every lost ship. Do you want that for her, Naira? A life of being their explanation for misfortune? Naira's heart lurched. Because beneath the cruelty there was a shard of truth. People did look for targets when things went wrong. They liked simple answers more than complicated kindness. Naira swallowed. I don't want to be their excuse. Then help me, Gaia insisted, sensing weakness. Step back. Let me handle this. I'll say you were dazzled. Overcome. I'll say the salt sign flared because of the bells or the incense or, Saurin cut in, you could let her be what she is. Gaia laughed once, harsh. A curse? Naira's head snapped up. A vow, she said, repeating Saurin's word from earlier, feeling it settle into her bones. You're the one who keeps calling me a curse. Maybe you should ask yourself why you like that word so much. Gaia stared at her like she'd never seen her before. A wolf's voice hummed low in Naira's mind, almost admiring. There it is. The tide turning. Naira exhaled slowly. I'm tired, Gaia, she said. Tired of shrinking so you can glow. Tired of being your favorite ghost. Gaia's eyes glossed. Tears. But Naira couldn't tell if they came from hurt or fury. Maybe both. You think I'm the enemy, she whispered. You, who never had to work to be special. You were born with the sea whispering your name. I had to make myself shine. Do you know what it's like? Being the ordinary sister standing next to the omen? Naira flinched. You're not ordinary. Exactly. Gaia snapped softly. I refuse to be. So forgive me if I don't want to disappear now that your skin decided to glow on command. The words hit Naira in a way nothing else had, because buried inside the pettiness and cruelty and envy, there was something painfully human. Fear of being replaced, of becoming invisible. Naira saw it then, not as an excuse, but as context. Gaia had grown up being called perfect, but also being told the sea didn't answer her. Naira had been called cursed, but also knew the world itself responded to her presence. They'd both been twisted by it. Naira's shoulders slumped a fraction. This was never a contest, she said, voice low. The sea doesn't love me instead of you. The wolves aren't yours or mine. They're themselves. You chose to make it a competition I never entered. Gaia looked away. It doesn't matter what I chose, she muttered. People will choose, and they always choose what makes them feel safest. Saurin finally stood. The movement was slow, deliberate, drawing Gaia's attention whether she wanted to give it or not. Then we give them something safer than fear, he said. We show them a queen who is not ashamed of what the sea gave her. We show them a bond that doesn't look like a curse. Naira's heart stuttered. Queen? Saurin's gaze found hers again, steady and open. I didn't come here looking for a court scandal, he said. I came because my wolves wouldn't stop pacing, because storms over your cliffs felt wrong, because something in the world was asking for witness. He drew a breath. I won't push you into a role you don't want, but I will be clear. I am not offering you a temporary distraction. I am offering you a place beside me. Naira's hands went cold around his. A life, a crown, a constant gaze, a constant risk of being blamed, but also a constant chance to be more than a rumor the kingdom tried not to look at. Gaia made a sound like a swallow choking. You barely know her, she said. You walked into one ceremony and decided she's your answer? Saurin shook his head. I walked into one ceremony and saw her stand under mockery without breaking, he said. I saw the living world rally to her when you tried to make her small. I saw her choose not to hide when hiding would have been easier. His mouth softened. And my wolves, who rarely agree on anything, all went quiet when she touched me. One of the wolves near the door huffed, almost smug, as if to say, "He's not wrong." Naira let out an unsteady breath that turned into a shaky laugh before she could stop it. Gaia heard it and went very still. "So that's it," she said softly. "You've already decided." Naira looked at her sister, at the girl who had once braided her hair on rainy days and taught her how to sneak honey cakes from the kitchen, who had also weaponized every insecurity Naira had ever had. "No," Naira said. "He hasn't." Both Saurin and Gaia turned to her. "I have," Naira finished. Silence. The word hung there. Simple, small, enormous. Naira straightened her spine, feeling the lingering warmth under her skin answer the decision. "I'm tired of being the ugly story people tell about the sea," she said. "If they're going to talk about me anyway, I would rather stand where I can hear it and answer them. And if I can belong anywhere without apologizing for breathing, I'd like to try." She looked at Saurin. "I don't know how to be anyone's queen. I barely know how to be my own person. But I want to learn, with someone who doesn't flinch when I smell like rain." Saurin's eyes lit with something like quiet joy, tempered by care. "We'll learn together," he said simply. "I've never had a queen who talks to wolves, or hens." Naira huffed a breath that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. "They're very opinionated, I've noticed," he said dryly. Gaia's lips parted, then pressed thin. "You're really going to do this," she said. "Walk out there at his side and let them mark you forever as the sea's mistake." Naira swallowed. "Not mistake," she said softly. "Sign." Gaia's shoulders dropped. For one moment, all the sharpness fell away, and Naira saw only her sister, tired, scared, human. "Then at least let me do one thing for you," Gaia said quietly. "Let me call the seamstresses. Your dress is soaked from nerves and your hairpins are crooked. If you're going to defy the kingdom, you might as well do it without looking like you lost a fight with the tide." Naira stared at her, stunned. It wasn't apology. It wasn't redemption. But it was something. A concession. A backwards way of saying she couldn't stop Naira, so she'd rather control the presentation than be shut out entirely. Naira nodded once. "All right," she said. "You can help with the hair." Saurin glanced between them, reading the shift. "I'll give you both a moment," he said, rising fully. "The next time you see me, I'll be pretending I understand Breeze Mist's ceremonial order." One of the wolves huffed, unmistakably amused. Naira let go of Saurin's hand slowly. The warmth lingered against her palm like a promise pressed into her skin. Saurin inclined his head to Gaia, courteous, not intimate. "Lady Gaia." "Your Majesty," Gaia replied, voice carefully smooth. He left the gallery with the wolves flowing after him, the air changing the moment they crossed the threshold. The door closed with a quiet click, leaving Naira and Gaia alone in the shifting green light. For a few heartbeats, neither spoke. Naira stared at her sister's hands. They were steady now, fingers no longer fluttering for the crowd's benefit. Gaia's shoulders had dropped just enough to show the weight she usually hid. "You really hate my dress," Naira said finally. Gaia snorted, an unpolished sound that belonged to the girl who used to steal honey cakes. "It looks like the sea coughed on you and the tailors just went with it." Despite everything, Naira barked a short, shocked laugh. "That's accurate." Gaia's mouth twitched. "Come on," she said, resigning herself with a sigh. "If you're going to become every ballad's tragic sea queen, at least let your hair survive the first chapter." She moved behind Naira, fingers already finding pins with the easy familiarity of years. "Sit," Gaia ordered, more out of habit than malice. Naira considered refusing on principle, then decided that some battles could be rerouted instead of fought. "I'll sit," she said, easing onto the low bench by the window. "But not because you ordered me." Gaia rolled her eyes in the mirror. "Congratulations. You've discovered defiance. Try not to weaponize it on the hairpins." Her hands moved with quick precision, unfastening pearls, smoothing tangled strands, retwisting them with more intention. Tug, twist, pin, like an unspoken language they both still knew. For a moment, it almost felt like the summers they used to steal in the tower room, braiding each other's hair and telling stories about who they'd be when they were older. Naira swallowed against the ache of it. Gaia caught her gaze in the mirror. "Don't cry," she said briskly. "Your eyes go red and you start sniffling, and then I have to fix your face, too." "That's very loving," Naira murmured. "You want me to say I'll miss our quiet life of pretending you don't exist during court events while I smile at people who call you a monster?" Gaia's voice sharpened, then softened again. "I'll miss knowing where you are, at least." Naira stared at their reflection. "You could have stood next to me," she said, "instead of in front of me." Gaia's fingers paused for half a second, then resumed. "It was easier this way. For you," Naira said. "Yes," Gaia answered, not even pretending otherwise. Silence settled between them like dust. Naira let it sit for a few breaths, then said quietly, "You know, you don't have to disappear just because I stopped letting you shrink me." Gaia's hands stilled. Naira took a breath. "You're clever," she continued. "You remember every name, every slight, every favor. You can walk into a room and make 3 alliances before anyone realizes you're bored. The sea might not answer you, but people do. You could use that for something other than making me small." Gaia's gaze met hers in the mirror, wary. "Like what? Become your smiling handler? Your pretty, powerless sister in the background while you talk to wolves?" "No," Naira said. "Like become the one who knows how to make nobles listen when I talk about things they'd rather ignore. Like stand beside me when I'm tired of explaining the same kindness to people who prefer cruelty. Like use that perfect memory of yours to make sure Breezemist doesn't forget what it did to the girl it's suddenly going to call holy." Gaia's throat worked. "You'd trust me with that?" Naira thought about all the times Gaia had twisted a knife precisely because she knew exactly where to aim. "I'd trust you," Naira said slowly, "to do anything that keeps you from fading into the background. You hate the shadows too much. If you're going to stand in the light, I'd rather you stand there for something that doesn't crush me." Gaia looked away, blinking quickly. "Well," she said after a moment, voice a little rough, "someone has to make sure you don't get eaten alive by councils and committees and bored nobles who think conversation is listing their family trees in order of importance." Naira raised an eyebrow. "Is that a yes?" "It's we'll see if you survive long enough to need me," Gaia muttered. Which, in Gaia language, was dangerously close to agreement. Naira's chest ached in a new way, hopeful and wary at once. Gaia fastened the last pearl and smoothed a loose strand over Naira's ear. "There," she said. "Now you look less like a drowned saint and more like a person who could reasonably terrify a council without intentionally trying." "That's a compliment?" Naira guessed. "Take what you can get," Gaia said. She squeezed Naira's shoulder, brief, firm, almost comforting. "Go then, before I change my mind and lock you in a broom closet for your own good." Naira stood, legs wobbling only slightly. At the doorway, she hesitated and looked back. "Gaia? What?" "Thank you," Naira said. "For the hair. And for not trying to ruin this part." Gaia's mouth pulled sideways. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "If he hurts you, he'll have to answer to me." From somewhere deep in the palace, like the faintest echo, Naira heard one distant, indignant cluck. Finally, someone talking sense. Naira smiled. "Deal." Gaia stood alone in the gallery, fingers still faintly slick with oil from her sister's hair. The silence settled back around her, but it felt different now, less hollow, more like a question she didn't know how to answer. She lifted her hand and stared at her own fingers. "For the first time in years, I touched my sister without trying to take something from her. The truth of it cut deeper than any public humiliation could have." Outside, the bells had finally stopped. The crowd's roar faded to a distant murmur. And Gaia didn't know what came next when you'd spent your whole life being the favorite, and suddenly realized favor wasn't the same as being loved. She pressed her palm flat against her chest, right where the ache lived. "Maybe," she thought, "maybe I'll stay, just to see if there's still time to learn something else, It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't redemption. It was just a crack in the wall she'd built. But for someone who'd spent years sealing every door shut, a crack was practically a revolution. Somewhere deep in the palace, a hen clucked once. Soft, almost gentle. About time, the sound seemed to say. If Naira had imagined the first time she'd walk beside an alpha king, she would have pictured a grand hall, or a stormlit balcony, or some sacred chamber washed in moonlight. She would not have pictured the palace square, with 3 children arguing about fish guts in the front row and an elderly baker openly crying into his apron. Yet here she was, stone under her shoes, sun on her face, Saurin's arm steady under her hand. The silence that met them as they stepped back into the square felt less like shock now, and more like recalculation, as if every mind present was trying to rewrite the story it had arrived with. Naira's rain scent drifted over the crowd, cool and clean. The wolves fanned out at the foot of the dais, not menacing, just present, their eyes bright and watchful. Saurin didn't tug her toward the highest step. He guided her only as far as the middle, then stopped, leaving the topmost place empty. Naira glanced up at that last step, surprised. "You're not going to stand where a king is supposed to stand?" she whispered. "I'm exactly where a king is supposed to stand," Saurin murmured back. "Beside the person everyone's staring at." The words lodged somewhere under her collarbone and refused to move. The High Herald from earlier hovered to the side, looking like a man who'd studied every script for every ceremony and suddenly discovered none of them applied. His scroll hung limp in his hands. My lords and ladies," he tried, voice wobbling. "People of Breeze Mist, we have witnessed—" Saurin spared him with a small shake of his head. "May I?" he asked Naira quietly, indicating the air in front of them. The space words might fill. Naira nodded, heart pounding. Her throat felt tight, but she wanted him to speak, needed him to. He stepped half a pace forward, not enough to block her from view, just enough to take the first wave of attention. "People of Breeze Mist," Saurin said, voice carrying steady across the stones. "I came to your kingdom because my wolves would not rest." A low murmur. People glanced at the ring of wolves, then at each other. "They are not gods," Saurin continued. "They do not speak in riddles. When they are hungry, they hunt. When they are wary, they pace. When they are content, they sleep. But for months, they did none of those things. They circled. They watched the sea. They waited." He turned his head, just enough to look at Naira, then back at the crowd. Today, they stopped waiting. The wolves, as if on cue, lowered their heads in quiet acknowledgement. Naira felt a strange flutter in her chest, like someone had opened a window inside her. "The salt sign," Saurin said, and he didn't spit the words like a curse. He spoke them like a title. "You've been taught to fear it, to hide it, to call it a punishment when it was an answer you didn't ask for." Unease rippled through the crowd. An older man near the back crossed himself with a gesture meant to ward off bad luck. A young woman bit her lip, eyes fixed on Naira with raw curiosity. Saurin's tone gentled. "In my lands, we have another name for it. We call it the tide's vow. When the sea touches someone and does not let go, it is not because it wants them drowned. It is because it wants them remembered." Naira's hands tightened around his arm. Remembered. All the years of being hidden, of being kept away from feasts and festivals, of hearing, "It's better this way, Naira," people talk, rose up like dark water inside her. Saurin didn't look at her, but somehow his words seemed to answer the part of her that had always asked, quietly and without hope, if there was a reason she existed like this. "You saw her glow when she touched me," he said simply. "That was not my power. That was hers, finally allowed to be seen." A woman in the crowd spoke up, voice shaking. "What does it mean?" Naira's heart jerked. It was the first time someone had asked instead of assuming. Saurin didn't rush to answer. He glanced at Naira first, checking. She swallowed. Her rain scent trembled. "They deserve to hear you." A wolf's voice brushed her thoughts. Not just him. Naira stepped the smallest bit forward, her arm still linked with Saurin's, but her weight her own. "It means," she said, forcing her voice past the tightness, "that the sea doesn't want your fear." Dozens of faces turned more fully toward her. Being stared at still hurt, but it hurt differently now. Less like being flayed, more like standing in strong wind. Naira drew breath. "It wants your honesty," she continued. "Your fishermen have always known that. You talk to the waves before you push your boats out. You bargain with storms. You don't pretend the water is tame." Her throat thickened. "I am not tame either. I never was. You tried to make me so by calling me wrong." Silence. Someone near the front, a woman with nets looped over one arm, nodded slowly, eyes bright. Naira's mouth went dry. "I hear things," she admitted, fingers digging into Saurin's sleeve for courage. "Animals. Weather. Sometimes the sea itself. Not with words, with feelings." She swallowed. "The world has been restless here. Not because it hates you, because it hates the way you taught your children to fear what it loves." A child's voice piped up, unfiltered. "Do you hear the gulls when they steal fish?" A few people shushed him, scandalized. Naira almost smiled. "Yes," she said. "They think they're hilarious." A flicker of laughter moved through the crowd, nervous but real. The tension eased a fraction. At the back, someone scoffed loudly. "So what? She talks to birds and we're supposed to kiss her feet?" Naira stiffened instinctively, bracing for the old, familiar burn of humiliation. Saurin's voice dropped, quiet but edged. "You're supposed to stop speaking of your future queen as less than she is." The word queen landed like a cannon shot. Naira's knees nearly buckled. Whispers exploded. "Queen? Sea queen? The salt queen? Has the alpha lost his mind? What will the council say? What will the old families do?" Naira felt sick. Saurin's arm tensed under her hand, anchoring her. He leaned closer, voice barely a breath in her ear. "If this is too much, say so. It's already too much." Naira whispered back, "But I'm still here." He exhaled, a sound half relief, half something softer. Before the crowd could whip itself into a proper frenzy, an older woman elbowed her way forward through the crush. Her hair was streaked with white, her hands rough with rope and salt, her shoulders broad from a lifetime of lifting nets. She stopped a few paces from the dais and stared up at Naira. Naira recognized her. Marla of the lower docks. The woman who had once, years ago, slipped Naira a warm roll after catching her watching the fishermen from behind a pillar. "You remember me, girl?" Marla called, unbothered by protocol. Naira's throat tightened. "Yes," she managed. "You gave me bread. When the council said I shouldn't be on the docks." Marla snorted. "Council can try telling the tide where to go, too, for all the good it'll do." She planted her fists on her hips. "When my husband went overboard in the Black Storm 5 winters back, who pulled his sorry hide back with 3 extra ropes and a warning in my bones that told me where to cast?" Naira's face heated. The sea. "And who heard it when no one else did?" Marla pressed. Naira swallowed. "I did, but that was just nothing," Marla cut in. "You came to the docks when they said you shouldn't. You stood in the spray like you were part of the water and told us where the wave would break hardest. Saved 5 men and 2 boys with that just." She jerked her chin at the crowd. "You lot liked calling her cursed then, too. Funny how you forget the parts where the curse keeps you breathing." A low, embarrassed murmur threaded through the square. Naira's vision blurred. She remembered that night. The panic. The feeling of being pulled out of bed by a force she couldn't name. The way her skin had felt like glass about to shatter if she didn't run to the water. The way the waves had boomed in her bones like a heartbeat out of rhythm. She had not thought anyone else had held on to the memory. Marla had. Saurin's voice warmed. "Thank you," he said genuinely. Marla squinted at him. "You step on my dock, Wolf King. You better learn to tie a decent knot. I'm not spoiling you just because you glow when you hold our girl's hand." A ripple of startled laughter broke over the crowd, bigger this time. Saurin's mouth twitched. "Duly noted." Naira let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Marla looked back up at her. "You want to stand where they can see you, Tide Girl?" she asked. "You stand. We'll handle anyone who thinks they can spit at you without tasting salt for a week." A tear slid hot down Naira's cheek. "Thank you," she whispered, voice cracking. Marla shrugged, brusque. "Don't thank me. Just remember us when you get your fancy crown. The sea feeds us first. The court eats after." Naira nodded, throat too tight to answer. The mood of the square had shifted. Not fully safe, not fully accepting, but cracked open. The story had splintered. People would still gossip, still fear, still twist. But now there was another version of events in the air, and it smelled like rain and rope and wolf fur instead of incense and contempt. Saurin let the silence sit for a beat, then bowed his head slightly. "I will ask for formal audience with your council," he said. "Not today. Today is for breath, for adjustment, for the truth of what you've already seen." He inhaled. "But know this. I did not come here to steal your air. I came because the world would not rest until I stood where she stands." Naira's heart hammered. He said it so simply, as if there was no other version that made sense. He lowered his voice so only she could hear. "You've done enough for one day." She almost protested. Something in her still desperate to earn every inch of grace by suffering twice as much. But the exhaustion roared up all at once, heavy and absolute. Her muscles shook, her mind buzzed. Her skin, still faintly warm, felt stretched over too much. "I think," she whispered, "if I stay here one more minute, I'll start saying things I can't take back." Saurin's lips curved faintly. "That could be entertaining." "It could be disastrous," she countered. "Then we walk away," he said. Just like that. Not punished, not dragged, just allowed to leave. Naira nodded, relief and terror colliding. Saurin turned back to the crowd one last time. "You've seen enough to talk about for months," he said dryly. "We'll give you the rest in pieces, so you don't choke on it." A startled bark of laughter escaped someone near the front. Then he guided Naira back toward the palace, wolves closing ranks with easy, practiced grace. As they crossed the threshold into the cooler hallway, the noise of the square muffled behind stone. The sudden quiet pressed in around them. Naira sagged without meaning to. Saurin shifted his arm to support more of her weight. "Easy," he murmured. "We're almost there." "Where?" she asked weakly. "Somewhere with chairs," he said. "And possibly cake." Naira blinked. "Cake? My mother swears by it for emotional upheaval," Saurin said. "She might not be wrong." Naira huffed a breath that was almost a laugh. "You have a mother." "Terrifying woman," Saurin said, tone fond. "You'll like her." A wolf near his knee snorted loud enough to echo. Naira eyed the wolf. Was that agreement or concern? "Both," came the dry answer in her mind. They made it back to Saurin's receiving room, the one with the chipped teapot and the fire that smelled like real wood instead of scented ceremony sticks. As soon as the door closed, Naira's legs gave up the last of their pretense. Saurin was faster. He caught her under her arms, easing her down onto the couch with more care than she'd ever seen anyone spend on her aside from Marla, yanking her away from a wave. "Sorry," Naira muttered, mortified. "I'm not usually this dramatic." "You've had a lifetime of being starved of air," Saurin said quietly. "Of course you're dizzy when you finally breathe." Her eyes stung again. She stared at the fire instead of at him. The flames licked at the logs, low and steady. A wolf thumped down near her feet, warm fur a few inches from her slippers. Naira let her toes nudge the wolf's side lightly, grounding herself in the feel of living weight so close. "You didn't have to do that," she said after a while, voice small. "Stand with me. Speak for me. You could have just taken me, claimed me. Let them swallow whatever story they wanted." Saurin settled into the chair across from her, elbows on his knees, fingers loosely linked. "I could have," he agreed. "If I wanted a mate who resented me in 5 years when she realized she'd jumped from one kind of cage to another." Naira flinched. "Is that what this is? A cage?" That's the question, isn't it? Saurin said. If our bond is just another rule that traps you, or if it's a gate we walk through together because we both prefer the same side. Naira's skin prickled at the word bond. Do you feel it? She asked haltingly. Besides the glow? Saurin's gaze dropped to her wrists, where the faint gold still traced her veins. Yes, he said, but I won't define it for you. He met her eyes. What do you feel, Naira? She swallowed. Exposed. Seen. Terrified. Alive. Too much, she said, because that was the only honest answer. Everything is too loud. The square. The sea. My own thoughts. She hesitated. You. Saurin's jaw flexed once. If my presence makes it worse, I can give you space. Naira almost said yes. Habit screamed for distance, for the safety of being alone with her fear where it couldn't embarrass anyone. But under that, something new whispered. You've been alone with it your whole life. Look where that got you. She shook her head, slow. It's different, she said. When you're near, it's still loud, but it's less sharp. Like the edges are sanded. Not silence, he said. Just shape. Yes, she breathed. He nodded once, as if that matched something he felt too. A knock sounded at the door. Naira jumped. Saurin's eyes flicked to the wolves. One padded silently over to the door, sniffed, then gave a short, unimpressed huff. Come in, Saurin called. The door opened to reveal a palace servant balancing a tray. On it sat a teapot, 2 mismatched cups, and a truly heroic wedge of honey cake. The servant bowed awkwardly. From the royal kitchens, Your Majesty, with, compliments. And, the cook says if anyone complains about the icing, he'll personally fight them. Naira made a choked sound. Saurin's eyes crinkled. Please convey my admiration and preemptive surrender. The servant fled, clearly relieved to escape a room full of wolves and emotional royalty. Saurin poured tea, then cut the cake into 2 uneven slices and nudged the larger piece toward Naira. She stared at it. I can't eat. You can, Saurin said. You just forgot how. Take a bite. If it tastes like cardboard, we'll blame trauma and pretend it was delicious anyway. Naira picked up the fork with shaking fingers, cut off the tiniest corner, and put it in her mouth. Honey, butter, a hint of citrus. She chewed, swallowed, and suddenly her body remembered it was attached to a living person, not a ceremony prop. Her stomach growled, mortifyingly loud. One of the wolves huffed, which in Naira's mind translated neatly to, there she is. Saurin's mouth tugged up. That sounded like someone who wants the rest of the slice. Naira took a bigger bite. As the sweetness spread through her, her heartbeat slowed from frantic to merely fast. The room seemed to expand again, her field of vision widening beyond the tight tunnel it had been. She risked looking at Saurin over the rim of her teacup. He was watching her, but not in the way people usually did. Not waiting for her to mess up for entertainment. Not evaluating her worth like a piece of flawed jewelry. Just paying attention. What happens now? She asked quietly. Saurin leaned back, exhaling. Now, he said. Now, we breathe. Your council will demand meetings. My advisors will send 30 letters each with varying levels of panic. Bards will start writing songs, half of them awful. Children will argue over whether you can command storms. Someone will probably try to sell authentic Sea Queen talismans 2 streets over. Naira winced. That sounds terrible. Welcome to being a symbol, Saurin said dryly. Everyone wants a piece of you for their own story. Our job, he caught himself, then corrected without missing a beat. Your job, if you still want it, is to make sure your story doesn't get drowned in theirs. Naira rolled the words around in her head. Our job, your job, choice, again and again, offered like a path instead of a trap. I think I do want it, she said slowly. I'm just afraid I won't survive it. Saurin's eyes softened. We'll make changes slowly, he said. You don't have to stand in front of the whole kingdom every day. We'll start with smaller rooms, fewer eyes. A corner of his mouth quirked. A select audience of very judgmental hens, maybe. Naira huffed a laugh. They'd be worse than councils. Then you'll be overprepared, Saurin said. I want to show you something. When you're ready. A place we call the Meeting of Tides. It explains more about what you are. Naira's skin tingled. Here? In Breezemist? Closer than you think, he said. But it will wait. For now, you need rest. I need so many things, Naira murmured, surprising herself with the admission. Saurin nodded. You'll have them. One at a time. We're not racing anyone. Outside, faint through stone, Naira heard the sea. It didn't sound angry. It sounded relieved. She finished her cake in slow, small bites, letting her body remember it belonged to her. When the plate was empty and the tea lukewarm, the exhaustion settled deeper, no longer a panicked tremor, but a heavy, honest weight. Her eyelids drooped. Saurin noticed immediately. Lie down, he said. I'll send word that you're not receiving anyone until tomorrow. Naira stiffened. They'll be offended. They offend easily, he said. They'll survive. I should be there, she protested weakly. Meet them. Prove I'm not fragile. You just redefined sacred tradition in front of your entire kingdom, Saurin said. You're not fragile. You're tired. There's a difference. Naira's chest tightened. She didn't have the strength left to argue. Carefully, she stretched out along the couch, turning so she faced the fire. One of the wolves shifted closer, a warm presence against the side of the couch. Can you stay? She mumbled, not sure if she meant the wolves or Saurin or both. Yes, Saurin said, immediate and simple. Naira's eyes fluttered open a crack. You have king things to do. They can wait, he said. The world has been waiting for you to be seen for years. It can give you an afternoon. Her throat burned. She let her eyes close. As she drifted, she became aware of the layered sounds in the room. The crackle of logs, the slow, deep breathing of wolves, the soft scrape of Saurin's chair as he shifted closer, the muted roar of the sea through stone. For the first time in a long time, Naira slept without curling herself small to take up less space. And somewhere, in the restless place where tides and dreams met, something older than Breezemist stirred. The tide's vow had been acknowledged. Now, it wanted to be fulfilled. When Naira woke, the light had changed. The fire had burned down to a bed of coals, glowing low and steady. The air felt different too. Less sharp, more settled, like the palace itself had unclenched a little. For a heartbeat, she didn't remember where she was. Then she felt the soft huff of breath against her fingers. She cracked one eye open. A wolf lay on the rug beside the couch, close enough that Naira's hand had, at some point, slid off the cushion and come to rest in its fur. The wolf hadn't moved away. Its flank rose and fell in slow, even rhythm. Saurin sat in the chair nearby, boots off, jacket loosened, head tipped back against the cushion. His eyes were closed, but Naira had the feeling he wasn't truly asleep. His posture held that coiled awareness of someone who had learned to rest without ever fully shutting the door on danger. Naira's chest tightened, an unfamiliar warmth seeping through the cracks of old reflex. He stayed. As if summoned by the thought, Saurin's eyes opened. They found her immediately. Hey, he said softly. Welcome back. Naira pushed herself up slowly, hair tumbling from its careful arrangement. How long? A few hours, Saurin said. The suns moved. The palace has survived without you heroically not fainting on every surface. Naira winced. I didn't faint. No, he agreed. You collapsed gracefully. Very different. She made a face. You're making fun of me. A little, he admitted. You look less like you're about to climb out of your own skin. That's worth a joke. Naira's lips tugged upward despite herself. Anyone come knocking while I was unconscious? Your council sent 3 messages, Saurin said. Your sister intercepted 2. I intercepted 1. Naira blinked. Intercepted? I told them their heir was resting and that any attempt to disturb that rest would result in me bringing all my wolves to their next meeting, Saurin said, entirely calm. Naira pictured the council chamber full of elders in stiff robes, suddenly sharing space with a dozen lounging wolves. She snorted. That's cruel. That's strategy, Saurin corrected. If they're going to fear someone, I'd rather it be me than you. Naira sobered. I don't want them afraid of you either. Good, he said, standing and stretching, joints cracking quietly. Then we'll give them something better than fear too. Eventually. For now, I just wanted a day without old men quoting older laws at you. Naira swung her legs over the side of the couch, bare feet brushing the rug. Her skin felt different. Less like a costume she'd been forced to wear, more like a garment she might grow into. The sea feels loud, she murmured. Quieter than before I slept, but awake. Saurin's gaze sharpened. Then it's time, he said. Time? For the meeting of tides, he reminded her. I told you about it before you fell asleep. Or at least I think I did. You were at the stage of exhaustion where I wasn't entirely convinced you could see straight. Naira tried to recall. It came back in foggy pieces. His voice, the word meeting, something about tides. What is it? She asked. Saurin hesitated for the first time since she'd met him, as if searching for the right starting point. Breeze mist, he said slowly. Wasn't always just cliffs and palaces and square stones. There was an in-between place, where sea and land and something older met. Your ancestors built over it. Hid it. Maybe to protect it. Maybe to control it. Histories disagree. Naira frowned. I've never heard of this. That's sort of the point, Saurin said. But the tide's vow, the thing your people call the salt sign, comes from there. It ties a person not just to the sea, but to that crossing. You've been feeling its pull your entire life without knowing where it was coming from. Naira's heart sped. You've seen it? I've seen where it should be, he said. Blocked. Sleeping. Angry. Angry. The word slid cold down her spine. Saurin stepped closer, careful. I won't drag you there today, he said. But the bond between you and it is awake now. It will only get louder if you pretend it doesn't exist. Better to meet it on your terms. Naira glanced toward the window, where a slice of sea showed between stone and sky. The waves looked normal from here. Whitecaps chasing each other, light catching on their backs. They didn't feel normal. What happens there? She whispered. At this meeting of tides. That depends, Saurin said. On you. On what the vow wants from you. On whether you accept it, reshape it, or... He paused, then chose honesty. Refuse it. Naira's lungs stung. Can I do that? Every bond can be refused, he said. The cost just varies. She thought of the council threatening exile, of the old stories of tide-marked children sent away, of all the times she'd curled small, wishing she could peel her own skin off and be normal. What would it cost? She asked. Saurin's expression shadowed. We won't know until you stand there, he said. And even then, I won't choose it for you. My people believe a vow like that, once broken, doesn't come back. The world would stop pulling at you, but the pull you've always felt, the sense of being woven into things, you might lose that too. It would be quieter, but emptier. Naira's fingers curled into the fabric of her dress. She remembered nights on the cliffs, the sense that if she stepped forward just right, she'd merge with the wind instead of fall, the way storms had sung in her bones, the way wolves she'd never met had walked at her side like they'd known her forever. Losing that would mean losing the one part of herself that had ever felt like more than a burden, but keeping it meant noise, responsibility, being unable to pretend she was just a girl in a tower. Naira swallowed. And if I accept it? Then it stops tugging you from the edges, Saurin said gently, and settles in the center. It becomes part of what you are on purpose instead of by accident. And if I reshape it? She asked. Saurin's mouth curved, faint and fierce. Then you make history, he said. The vow has always been a one-way claim. Sea-marking human, world-claiming body. If anyone can convince it to be a partnership instead of a possession, It's someone who has spent her entire life refusing to be only what other people called her. Naira's heart pounded. This was too big, too much. And yet, the restless hum under her skin had been growing since the square. Sleep had quieted it, but not erased it. Now, listening, she could feel it rising again, like a tide sliding toward shore. "Where is it?" she asked softly. "This place." Saurin's eyes held hers. "Under your feet," he said. "Under all of this." Naira blinked. "In the palace?" "Beneath it," he said. "The meeting of tides is an old cavern. Half rock, half water. Your ancestors built the first hall above it. They used to hold coronations there. Until fear won." Naira's head spun. "There's a sacred tide cavern under the palace, and nobody told me." Saurin's jaw flexed. "They didn't want you anywhere near it, because you were already too much for them." The hurt of that sank in slowly, like cold. Her whole life, people had looked at her like she was a problem. And all that time, the thing that made her a problem had been below her, unacknowledged, like a secret ache under the foundation. Naira slid off the couch, bare feet hitting cool stone. "Can you take me there?" she asked. "Not alone," Saurin said. "This is your kingdom, your bloodline's vow. I won't drag your legacy somewhere it doesn't want to go, but I can walk you to the boundary." Naira drew a breath that tasted like decision. "Then let's go," she said. Saurin studied her for a moment, searching her face for cracks. "Now," she added, before she could think her way out of courage. His mouth tilted. "Very well," he said. "Put your shoes on. The stones down there are not kind." Naira looked down at her bare feet, then at the heeled ceremonial shoes by the fireplace. She made a face. "Those?" Saurin eyed them. "Do you own anything less likely to break your ankles?" "Not in this palace," she muttered. "Court thinks discomfort is refinement." Saurin sighed, then crouched to reach under a nearby low table. His hand emerged holding a worn pair of leather boots. Naira stared. "You keep boots hidden in my palace?" "I've been to enough courts to know better than to trust their footwear," he said, unbothered. "These are spare. My mother insists I stash them everywhere in case I have to flee solemn nonsense at speed." Naira choked on a laugh. "Your mother sounds dangerous." "She is," Saurin said. "You're going to adore her." He set the boots in front of Naira. They were a little big, but sturdy, scuffed from use, laces frayed at the ends. Naira slid her feet in. They were the first shoes she could remember wearing that didn't make her feel like she was pretending to be someone else. Saurin stood. "Ready?" Naira nodded, heart in her throat. They left the receiving room and moved deeper into the palace, past the grand corridors Naira knew, down side stairs she'd only ever seen servants use, then down further, where stone turned damp and the air cooled. Torches burned in old brackets here, their flames low and steady. The walls narrowed, carved rock rising up on both sides. The smell changed too. Less polish, more earth. Underneath it all, the steady, quiet presence of water. Naira's skin prickled with every step. The wolves padded ahead now, unhurried but alert, as if they knew exactly where they were going. Naira did not. Yet with each turn, her bones hummed louder. At one bend, she stopped. "What is it?" Saurin asked. She pressed a palm to the wall. The stone was cool, but under the surface, something vibrated faintly, like a drum beat muffled by cloth. "This way," she said, surprising herself. Saurin's brows rose. "Lead then." She walked, following the pull, not in her mind but in her ribs, left at the next fork, down a steeper set of stairs. The air grew cooler still, damp curling against her cheeks. The torches thinned out. Glow from bioluminescent moss picked up the slack, soft green spreading across rock. The sound of water reached them, a slow, deep lapping, not like the open sea. Closer, enclosed. Naira rounded the last corner and stepped into a chamber that shouldn't have been able to fit under a palace. It was vast and low-ceilinged at once, a great hall carved by time instead of tools. The roof arched in rough curves, dripping in places where stalactites had begun to form. The floor wasn't truly a floor at all, but a broad tongue of stone sloping down into a black pool that glowed faintly from within. The water wasn't still. It wasn't choppy either. It moved with the slow, deliberate breath of something old. Naira stopped at the edge of the stone shelf. Her tide-marked skin thrummed. Her rain scent bloomed, then dissolved, as if the entire cavern smelled like that already. This, Saurin said quietly, is the meeting of tides. Naira barely heard him. The pull that had haunted her since childhood surged. Not a drag forward, not a demand, just invitation. She stepped closer to the water's edge. Careful, Saurin warned, hand hovering near her back without touching. The drop is deeper than it looks. Naira knelt at the lip. The glow in the pool intensified, pale blue-green light swelling from below like something waking. Her reflection wavered on the surface. Gray pearl skin, gold thread veins, white salt hair, eyes wide and dark. For the first time, she didn't flinch from her own face. "Hello," she whispered, feeling a little foolish. The water sighed against stone and answered, not with words, with sensation. Relief. First, so strong it punched the air from her lungs. Then joy, sharp and bright. And under it all, a deep, bone-deep sadness that tasted like years of being ignored. Naira gasped. Saurin's hand landed lightly on her shoulder, steadying. "What do you feel?" "Everything," she breathed. "It's happy and hurt." The wolves lay down a few paces back, heads on paws, watching with unnervingly solemn eyes. Even they seemed small in this place. Naira reached out, fingers hovering just a breath above the surface. "May I?" she asked, not sure who she was asking. The glow pulsed. Her heart answered. She dipped her fingertips into the water. Cold. Then warmth. Then something else. Weightless and heavy at once, like she dipped her hand into the sky. Images, not clear pictures but impressions, flashed through her mind. Faces she didn't recognize. Crowns made of shell and bone. Children with tide skin laughing as they ran along a shore that looked like breeze mist, but wasn't yet smothered in stone. Then, a closing. A hall being built above this place. Doors locked. Stairs walled off. Fear spoken like prayer until it sounded holy. Naira's breath hitched. Tears spilled down her cheeks without her realizing. "What is it?" Saurin asked, voice roughened with concern. "They hid it," she whispered. "They were afraid. My family. My line. They locked this away and then pretended it was a nightmare instead of this." Saurin's grip on her shoulder tightened gently. "Can you feel the vow itself?" he asked. "The part that's yours?" Naira focused. The pool's presence shifted, broad awareness narrowing, like a tide pulling back to reveal one specific shell on the shore. There. A strand. Thin but unbreakable, stretching from the water straight into her chest. She followed it inward and saw herself, small, standing on the cliffs as a child, feeling pulled without understanding. Saw herself in the square, skin glowing under Saurin's hand. Saw herself here now, fingers in the water. "What do you want?" she whispered to the unseen thing. "From me?" The answer came not as a command, but as a yearning. Connection. Balance. Witness. Naira's throat burned. "I'm trying," she choked, "but I don't know how to be this and human at the same time." A soft, startling sound echoed in her mind, almost like laughter, not mocking, delighted. The vow wasn't asking her to stop being human. It was asking her to stop letting fear make her smaller than she was. She sat back on her heels, water dripping from her fingers. "I don't want to break it," she said, voice shaking. "I thought I did. When I was younger. When I wished I could just be normal. But I don't. Not now." Saurin let out a breath she hadn't known he'd been holding. "But I also don't want it to own me," Naira continued, surprising herself with the boldness. "I don't want to be a symbol people throw at each other when they need someone to blame. I don't want the sea to use me as a threat." She lifted her chin, tears tracking slowly. "So, if you want me, you don't get to have me as a puppet. You get me as a person. I choose how I carry you. Or we don't do this at all." The cavern went very, very still. Even the wolves held their breath. Saurin's hand on her shoulder turned to iron, as if he was ready to drag her away if the water reached for her wrong. The glow in the pool dimmed. For one awful heartbeat, Naira thought she'd said the wrong thing. That the vow would snap. That the pull would vanish, leaving her hollow. Then the light surged. Not outward. Inward. The strand between her and the pool thickened. Not into a chain, but into something that felt startlingly like a hand clasp. A partnership. Naira toppled back, landing hard on her backside. Breath punched out of her. Saurin caught her under the arms, hauling her further from the edge. "Naira, I'm okay," she gasped, dizzy. Her skin flared warm, not just at her wrists now, her throat, her chest. The lines of her veins lit softly under her pearled skin, gold branching like sunlight through water. The glow didn't hurt. It didn't burn. It settled, then faded, leaving only a faint shimmer when she moved. The pool's light dimmed to its earlier level, calm again. Naira panted, heart racing. "It agreed," she whispered. "It heard me." Saurin crouched in front of her, hands braced on either side of her on the stone. "Explain," he said, voice low but urgent. Naira laughed, shaky. "I told an ancient ocean-bound promise that it had to respect my boundaries," she said. "And it did." Saurin stared at her. Then he did something she hadn't seen him do fully yet. He smiled. Not small, not hidden, wide, bright, like dawn breaking over storm clouds. "Of course you did," he said. "Of course you walked into a sacred cavern and negotiated with it." Naira's cheeks flushed. "Is that bad?" "That's extraordinary," he said. "You just changed how this thing works. It's not just claiming you. You're claiming it back." She laughed again, a little hysterically. "I feel like I should be more graceful while changing ancient magic." "You're conscious," Saurin said. "That's more than most manage." The wolves finally relaxed, lying down fully. In the back of Naira's mind, a hen's distant smug cluck floated up from some far corner of the palace. Knew she wasn't just pretty sea light. Naira shook her head, breathless, half laughing, half crying. "They're going to lose their minds when they find out." "Good," Saurin said. "They've had them too long without using them properly." Naira wiped her cheeks with the heels of her hands. What do I do now?" "Now," Saurin said. "We go back up. Slowly. You drink water that isn't full of primordial contracts. And we start planning how to tell your council that the thing they've been terrified of for generations is now under new management." Naira snorted. "They're going to love that." "They'll survive," Saurin said. "And if they don't, we'll find new council members who can handle a queen who talks back to the sea." Queen. The word didn't feel as impossible as it had that morning. Still heavy, but less like a costume, more like something that might one day fit. Naira took one last look at the glowing pool. "Thank you," she whispered. The water lapped gently against stone. And for the first time in her life, Naira didn't feel dragged by it. She felt walked beside. Saurin offered his hand. She took it. They climbed back toward the light together, leaving the meeting of tides humming quietly beneath the world, a vow renegotiated, waiting to see what its new partner would become. By the time they reached the upper corridors again, Naira's legs felt like wet rope. Negotiating with ancient magic, it turned out, used muscles she hadn't known she had. "Do not," she panted. "Let me fall on my face in front of anyone important. I'll personally throw myself under you before that happens," Saurin said. She snorted. "Very dignified, Your Majesty. You set a new standard for dignity when you told the ocean no," he replied. "Everyone else is just catching up." They turned into a side passage that led back toward the inhabited wing of the palace. Voices drifted from ahead. Staff moving, distant clatter from the kitchens, the murmur of a world that had kept spinning while Naira argued with tides. A blur of motion shot out from a doorway, followed closely by a flustered servant, and nearly collided with Naira's knees. Naira staggered. Saurin reacted instantly, catching her elbow. The blur backed up, revealing itself as a small boy with wild dark hair, big eyes, and a face currently covered in what looked suspiciously like berry jam. He froze, then bowed so fast he almost headbutted the floor. "Your Highness," he squeaked. Sorry, I wasn't— There was a cat." A calico streaked past behind him, tail high, looking unbothered. Naira blinked. "It's all right," she said quickly. "You're not hurt, are you?" The boy blinked up at her, jam-smeared. "No, Your Highness. The cat is emotionally wounded, but she'll live." Naira's lips twitched. Saurin's gaze flicked between them, amused. "What's your name?" Naira asked. "Perrin, Your Highness," he said, straightening. "My father's a guard. My mother bakes the honey cakes. Not all of them, just the good ones." He stopped, mortified. "I mean, she says she bakes the good ones. I'm sure all the honey cakes are good." "Relax, Perrin," Saurin said mildly. "You're among friends." Perrin's eyes went round. "You're the Wolf King." "So they tell me," Saurin said. Perrin's mouth outpaced his caution. "You're going to marry the Tide Princess, right?" Naira choked. Saurin coughed into his fist. Perrin's face went crimson. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't supposed to say that out loud. The kitchen says it all the time, but they say not to say it where important ears can hear, and then I saw you and forgot which ears were important." Naira held up both hands, laughing breathlessly. "It's all right," she said. "Your ears are important too." Perrin stared at her like she'd turned into a dragon. "My ears? They're how you hear who's secretly burning the honey cakes," she said seriously. "That makes them vital to the kingdom." He blinked, considering this. A wolf at Saurin's side let out a faint, approving puff. Naira glanced at Saurin. "Is there a reason children are allowed to sprint around hallways where traumatized heirs might be staggering?" "Tradition," Saurin said solemnly. "Every palace needs at least one small chaos spirit to keep the stones from getting bored." Perrin beamed. Naira shook her head, smiling. "Be careful," she told Perrin. "And maybe, don't tell everyone you ran into me coming out of the lower halls." Perrin nodded so vigorously his hair flopped. "Yes, Your Highness. I'll tell them I saw you in a majestic, dignified place like the library instead." Naira laughed. "That works." He saluted, badly, and sprinted off after the calico. Saurin watched him go. "He's going to be a problem," he said fondly. Naira's heart felt unexpectedly lighter. They walked on, weaving back into the busier part of the palace. Servants paused to bow or curtsy, eyes flicking to Naira with new expressions she couldn't yet name. Not all were kind, but fewer held naked disgust. Progress, she supposed, came in inches. At the corner near her rooms, they almost ran into Gaia. This time, Naira saw her sister's expression before Gaia had time to put new ones on. Tired, worried, relieved to see Naira upright, annoyed to be relieved. Then the mask slid into place, composed and lovely. "There you are," Gaia said. "You disappear for hours and leave me to entertain half the council rehashing prophecy like it's gossip. Do you know how many times I had to say, 'as the sea wills,' without screaming?" Naira's guilt kicked in automatically. "Sorry, we were below." Gaia's gaze sharpened. "Below where?" Naira hesitated. Saurin answered smoothly. "We visited the old caverns," he said. "They're active." Gaia's eyes widened openly for once. "You went there?" she hissed. "Are you insane? That place is closed off," Naira finished. "By our ancestors. Out of fear, not wisdom." Gaia's jaw worked. "The last tide-marked heir who went down there refused to come back up," she said sharply. "She said the water was kinder than the court. They called it a tragic accident in the histories. It wasn't. She chose it. You want that written about you?" Naira's stomach lurched. "I didn't know that." "Of course you didn't," Gaia snapped. "They buried the story. Like they bury everything that doesn't fit the neat version of breeze mist they feed children." She took a breath, smoothed her expression. "So? Are you all right?" Naira blinked. There it was again. That grudging, sideways concern Gaia tried very hard to couch in irritation. "I'm more all right than I was," Naira said carefully. Gaia searched her face, then her glow-veined wrists, then flicked a glance at Saurin. The sea didn't eat her then. she said. Good. It would have been spectacularly inconvenient for my afternoon, Naira huffed. You care so deeply. I don't have the energy to train a new heir, Gaia muttered. Her eyes softened a fraction. Besides, if anyone's going to challenge you, it'll be me. Respectfully. Naira's chest warmed. Noted. Saurin cleared his throat. Lady Gaia, I'll need to speak with the council soon. We've adjusted some things below. They should know before the changes come knocking on their doors at high tide. Gaia grimaced. Wonderful. More old men hyperventilating into embroidered handkerchiefs? She flicked invisible dust from her sleeve. Give me until tomorrow. I'll get them softened up. Right now, half of them are still deciding whether to call you a miracle or a mistake. Naira's skin crawled. Me? Both of you, Gaia said. Separately and together. It's impressive, really. Takes talent to panic people in 2 dimensions at once. Saurin inclined his head. We'll wait until you send word. In the meantime, I'd like Naira to rest. Gaia eyed her sister. You do look like someone wrung you out and hung you on a line, she observed. I'll have food sent up. Real food, not whatever they give you on ceremony days. Naira blinked. You've been watching what I eat? Someone has to, Gaia sniffed. Left to your own devices, you'd live on tea and guilt. Naira laughed, startled. That's fair. Gaia's gaze softened again, just for a heartbeat. Go, she said. Sleep, eat, whatever it is people who negotiate with oceans do afterward. I'll play nice with the council, for now. Naira reached out on impulse and squeezed Gaia's hand. Gaia allowed it for exactly 2 seconds before pulling back with a theatrical shudder. Don't get sentimental. I have a reputation. Naira smiled. For what? For being terrifyingly competent in impossible situations, Gaia said briskly. Don't ruin it by telling people I can also brush hair and order soup. She swept away, skirts whispering. Naira watched her go, then turned to Saurin. She's trying, Naira said slowly. In her way. She is, Saurin agreed. That doesn't erase what she's done, but it makes room for what she might do next. Naira nodded, absorbing that. They reached her chamber door. Naira paused with her hand on the latch. Are you staying in this wing? She asked, suddenly unsure of what was allowed to be asked. For now, Saurin said. My official guest rooms are on the east side, but I told your steward I preferred to be closer to the cliffs. And to you. He added the last part without ceremony, like it was simply true. Naira's pulse skipped. Is that allowed? I'm a foreign king, he said dryly. I get away with things for at least 3 days before anyone gathers the courage to tell me no. Naira's mouth curved. Convenient. Occasionally, he said. For tonight, I'll be down the hall. He inclined his head toward a door further along. If you wake up hearing water where it shouldn't be, send a wolf. Naira glanced at the nearest wolf. They're not exactly subtle. Good, Saurin said. Sometimes subtlety is overrated. Silence stretched for a moment. Not uncomfortable, just full. Naira cleared her throat. Thank you, she said. For everything. You're doing the hard part, he said. I'm just here to say, yes, that's insane, and then help anyway. Naira pulled a breath into lungs that finally felt like they had room. Good night, Saurin, she said softly. His eyes warmed. Good night, Naira. She slipped into her room. It smelled like salt and old wood and lavender from the sachets Gaia insisted on hiding in her drawers. Familiar and strange now, as if the girl who lived here that morning wasn't quite the same as the one stepping over the threshold now. Naira leaned her back against the door and closed her eyes. Beneath the stone, the meeting of tides pulsed quietly, not dragging at her anymore. Beside that awareness, another thread hummed, warmer, edged with cedar and wolf fur and the steady beat of a heart that had, somehow, found a rhythm next to her own. Naira let herself feel all of it. Fear, hope, exhaustion, something like the beginning of belonging. Then she pushed off the door, walked to the window overlooking the sea, and opened it. The wind rushed in, cool and alive. Naira breathed it in, eyes on the horizon. All right, she whispered to the waves, to the wolves, To the vow, and the future, and the boy in the hall, and the king down the corridor. Let's see what we become. The council chamber of breeze mist had always felt to Naira like the inside of a conch shell. Echoes twisted into importance until nobody could tell where the original sound had started. Today, it felt smaller. Or maybe she was finally refusing to fold herself to fit it. 12 stone seats curved around the circular room, each carved with old symbols. Nets, waves, ships, gulls. High above, a round opening let in a column of gray daylight, the sea breeze dragging in the smell of salt and distant rain. Naira stood at the center of the circle with Saurin at her right, Gaia at her left. The arrangement had not been accidental. Gaia had insisted. "If you walk in alone, they'll circle," she'd said earlier, pinning Naira's hair back with quick, confident fingers. "If you walk in bracketed by a foreign king and their favorite golden daughter, they'll at least pretend to listen before they start clutching their pearls." Naira had wanted to argue about being bracketed, but she was too tired to quibble with strategy that, unfortunately, made sense. Now, as the last of the counselors took their seats, Naira felt the weight of 12 gazes. Some wary, some curious, some hard as old coral. Elder Hadron, whose beard had more salt than the bay, cleared his throat. "Princess Naira," he said slowly. "King Saurin, Lady Gaia." He inclined his head in order of rank, his eyes lingering on Naira with an expression that hovered between awe and suspicion. "You requested this audience. We are listening." Naira's heart thudded. Her mouth went dry. Saurin's presence beside her was a quiet warmth. He didn't touch her. Not here. Not where every gesture would be dissected. But she could feel him like a steady line at her side. Gaia leaned just close enough that her sleeve brushed Naira's for half a second. A silent, sideways nudge. "Breathe." Naira did. "I went below the palace today," she said. No pretty preamble. No ritual phrases. Just truth. To the meeting of tides. Every counselor stiffened. Gasps. A muttered curse. Someone's chair scraped against stone. Elder Mara, the only woman on the council and the one who usually spoke least, actually leaned forward. "That place is sealed," she said. "By law." "By fear," Saurin corrected mildly. "Not law." Elder Hadron shot him a sharp look. "With respect, Your Majesty, our laws and our fears are our own concern. Not when they bleed into my lands in the form of restless seas and sleepless wolves," Saurin said, still calm. "But I'll let Naira speak for herself." Naira swallowed. "The vow down there, the thing you call the salt sign, it has been alone. For a very long time." Elder Ruvan snorted. "It is an ancient force, Princess. It does not have feelings." Naira met his gaze. "It does," she said quietly. "You just haven't been listening." A low murmur. She pressed on before she could lose her slender thread of courage. "You tried to cut yourselves off from it," she said. "You built stone over something that wasn't meant to be buried. You turned a promise into a monster, and then blamed the monster for everything you were too frightened to face." "Careful, girl," Elder Jorek snapped. "You speak of your own ancestors." Naira's chest hurt, but she didn't back down. "I know," she said. "And they were wrong." The word wrong echoed, sharp, shocking. Elder Mara's eyes narrowed, not in anger, more like interest. "What exactly did you do down there?" she asked. Naira hesitated. The truth felt enormous. Ridiculous. Like claiming she'd argued with thunder. "I renegotiated," she said. Silence crashed down. Gaia choked. "You what?" Naira's cheeks heated. "I told it I would not be a puppet," she said, forcing each word out. "That if it wanted to work through me, it had to treat me as a partner. That I wouldn't be its threat to wave at you when you made choices it didn't like. Or yours to wave at each other." Elder Hadron stared at her as if he'd never seen her before. "You spoke to the vow." "It spoke to her," Saurin said quietly. She just refused to let it be the only voice in the conversation. Elder Ruvan scoffed. "This is madness. The vow is not a person to be bargained with like a fishmonger over price." Naira's temper, frayed thin by the day, snapped just a little. Have you tried talking to it? She asked. Ever? Ruvan flushed. Of course not. Right, Naira said. You locked a living power under your home and then refused to speak to it because you were so certain it wouldn't understand. Gaia coughed once, badly hiding a laugh. Elder Mara's mouth twitched. Elder Hadron grunted. Assuming we believe you, he said. What does this renegotiation mean? For Breeze Mist? Naira inhaled. This was the heart. This was why she'd come here instead of hiding in her tower and pretending the glow in her veins was a private miracle. It means, she said slowly, that the vow isn't here to punish us, or to choose favorites for the fun of it. It cares about balance. Her throat thickened. If we poison the sea, it will answer. If we hoard the catch and let children starve, it will answer. Not out of spite. Out of correction. Correction looks a lot like curse when you're on the wrong side of it. Elder Jorek muttered. Exactly, Naira said. You feared it because you knew deep down you were doing things that wouldn't stand up to being seen clearly. Several counselors shifted in their seats, offended and, judging by the flickers of guilt Naira could sense, uncomfortably aware she was right. What does this have to do with you becoming queen? Elder Hadron demanded. Because that is what all this circling is about, isn't it? Naira's stomach flipped. Yes, she said. And no, she wet her lips. I didn't ask to be born like this. I didn't ask the sea to mark me. But it did. You can't change that because it's inconvenient. Ruvan glared. We can choose not to put a tide-marked heir on the throne. You can, Saurin said. And then you can live with a restless vow that feels rejected and finds other, less direct ways to push back? Have you enjoyed the last few winters of storms? The strange tides? The ships vanishing from calm seas? Elder Mara stiffened. You think that's punishment? I think that's imbalance, Saurin said. And imbalance always aches. The world has been limping. You have a chance to stop that. He looked at Naira, not at the council. If she wants it? Naira felt 12 stares burn into her skin. She could almost see the versions of her they each held in their heads. A curse, a tool, a risk, a miracle, a problem, a solution. She was tired of being everyone's story but her own. I am not asking for your blessing to exist, she said, surprised at the steadiness of her own voice. I already do. I am not even really asking for your blessing to be queen. She looked up at the round opening above, where a sliver of sky showed, pale and stubborn. The vow has already claimed me. Saurin has already chosen me. The sea has already recognized me. You are late to the decision. Elder Jorek sputtered. You insolent. I am, Naira agreed. And I have been polite my entire life. Where has that gotten me? Hidden. Humiliated in front of my people. She met his eyes. Respectfully, Elder. I'm done being grateful for crumbs. Gaia made a soft, delighted sound that might have been a suppressed cheer. Elder Maera's expression shifted into something Naira had never seen directed at her from that seat before. Respect. What are you asking us for, then? Maera said. Naira exhaled. Cooperation, she said. Not control. Cooperation. You are good at things I am not. You understand trade and numbers and old treaties. You know where the kingdom's bones are buried. She swallowed. I need that. The vow needs that. It cares about balance, not details. I care about both. Elder Hadron frowned, thinking. You would listen to us. Naira's chest hurt. If you listen back, she said. When I tell you the sea is angry, you don't get to call me hysterical and ignore it. When I tell you wolves smell hunger in the lower docks, you don't get to raise taxes on the fishermen and call it necessary adjustment. This goes both ways, or it doesn't go at all. Silence. Saurin watched her with that particular kind of stillness he had when she surprised him in a good way. Gaia looked half proud, half annoyed she hadn't delivered that line herself. Elder Ruvan sneered. And if we refuse? If we say the risk of your bond is too great? That the kingdom can't bear your volatility? Naira's fingers trembled, but she didn't look away. Then I will not force myself on your throne, she said. I will leave. She heard Saurin inhale sharply beside her, but she pressed on. With the vow, because it chose me. Not this room. Gasps. What? Jorek barked. You can't. I don't know what will happen to Breezemist if the vow follows me, Naira said honestly. I don't want to know. That is not a threat. It is a fact I am begging you to consider before you let your fear make this decision. Elder Mara's knuckles whitened on the arms of her chair. You would walk away, she said slowly, to spare us from ourselves. Naira's voice cracked. To spare myself, she admitted, and the wolves, and the children on the docks, and the tide-marked baby 5 generations from now, who might be born into a world still too afraid to hold them. The air in the chamber turned thick. Saurin spoke into it, low. This isn't about capturing a queen, he said. It's about whether you're willing to grow into the world that's already here, instead of clinging to the one that's cracking. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. Then Elder Mara stood. Her joints popped, a small human sound in the heavy air. I remember, she said quietly, the night your mother went into labor with you, Naira. The way the waves slammed against the cliffs. The way the candles in this very room burned blue. Naira blinked, startled. You were here. I was an apprentice scribe then, Naira said. Barely older than you are now. Her gaze softened. Your mother bled to bring you into this world. She begged us, not to let fear eat you whole. Naira's vision blurred. I did not keep that promise, Naira said. I let fear rule my votes, my silences. Her hands tightened. I am tired of being ruled by it. She looked around at the others. We have been given a chance older kingdoms would drown for, she said. A queen tied to the living world, and a bond that has finally agreed to listen instead of just demand. If we turn our backs on that now because it is uncomfortable, we deserve every storm that comes. Elder Hadron scowled, conflicted. Myra, change is frightening, I know. But I'm more frightened of what we become if we hide another tide-marked child away and call it keeping them safe. She turned back to Naira. If you will have us as clumsy partners instead of perfect cowards, you have my vote. Naira's heart slammed against her ribs. Thank you, she whispered. One by one, the other counselors looked at each other, then at Naira. Not all of them softened, but enough did. Elder Hadron exhaled through his nose. I'm too old to be learning new ceremonies, he grumbled. But I've survived worse adjustments than a queen who actually listens to fishermen. He lifted his hand. You have my vote. On one condition. Naira braced. What? You don't forget, he said, that you're flesh, not just vow. That you bleed and sleep and eat cake like the rest of us. We've had enough of symbols. We need a person. Naira's throat tightened. I can promise that, she said. I've spent my whole life being only flesh to some and only symbol to others. I'd like to see what it feels like to be both. A few counselors smiled despite themselves. In the end, not every voice was enthusiastic. But when the counting was done, when palms had been raised and words spoken, the numbers were clear. The council accepted her, not unanimously, but decisively. Naira's knees nearly buckled with the weight of it. Saurin's hand brushed her elbow, invisible to most, a small, steady touch. Gaia let out a breath she'd been holding so long her shoulders sagged. Well, she said lightly, breaking the tension before anyone could get sentimental. Now that we've established Naira isn't being dramatically exiled, can we discuss more pressing matters? Elder Jorek glared. Such as? Gaia smiled, sharp and bright. Such as how we're going to stage a coronation that doesn't bore the wolves to death. A ripple of startled laughter broke over the room. Even Naira laughed, the sound a little wild, a little cracked, but real. Saurin shook his head. I told you she was terrifyingly competent, he murmured. Naira wiped at her eyes, breath coming easier. For the first time, the council chamber didn't feel like a shell full of distorted echoes. It felt like a room where her voice might actually return to her intact. Coronation planning, Naira quickly discovered, was less about crowns and more about chaos. Within an hour of leaving the council chamber, the palace had erupted into a whirlpool of activity. Messengers sprinted through halls. Tailors appeared like summoned spirits. The kitchen doubled its noise level. Gaia took command of the social aspects with predatory efficiency. If someone's going to use etiquette to get things done, it might as well be me. Saurin vanished into meetings with his own advisors, who had arrived earlier that week, prepared to discuss trade, and now found themselves contemplating how to present a sea-bonded queen to the wolf courts without causing heart failure. Naira's role in most of this, according to everyone except Naira, was to rest and be available for fittings, which would have been delightful if she weren't vibrating with nerves. She stood on a dais in her chamber while 3 tailors circled her, pins in their mouths, measuring tapes snapping. "We'll need fabric that catches light like water," one muttered. "And something to echo the wolves," another said, but subtly. "We can't make her look like she rolled in fur." "Do not roll me in fur," Naira said faintly. A 4th voice cut through from the doorway. "We're not turning her into a parade float," Gaia said, sweeping in. "Back away, all of you. I need to see her without your fever dreams." The tailors retreated a step, chastened. Gaia circled Naira once, hand on her chin, considering. "We're not hiding it," she murmured. "Not anymore." "Hiding what?" Naira asked. "The thing they've been pretending not to see," Gaia said. "The way your skin catches light. The veins, the hair. If we try to cover it, they'll think we're still ashamed. We're not doing that." Her eyes lit with a sudden, wicked idea. "We're going to make it fashion." Naira swallowed. "That sounds dangerous." "It's going to be glorious," Gaia said. She snapped her fingers at the tailors. "Deep blue, not the usual Royal Navy. Darker, midnight water. We'll layer sheer silver over it so it moves when she does. Minimal jewelry. Her veins and the vow's glow are the real decoration." One of the tailors, a wiry woman with ink stains on her fingers, nodded eagerly. "We can weave in thin gold thread at the cuffs to echo the markings." "And the wolves?" another asked. Gaia grinned. "They're your problem. Make something that won't shed when they brush past her." Naira groaned. "They're going to brush past me?" "They're going to escort you," Gaia said. "You can't have a sea-vowed queen without a wolf honor guard. It's practically illegal in story logic." Naira made a face. "You're thinking in ballads again." "I plan for the songs as much as the day," Gaia said. "If they're going to immortalize this mess, we might as well give them good material." The tailors surged back in, energized by instructions. Fabric swatches appeared. Someone started humming. Naira's mind spun. "Stop," she blurted. Everyone froze. Even Gaia. Naira flushed. "I'm sorry, I need a minute, without pins." Gaia's expression softened, just a touch. She waved the tailors toward the door. "Go sketch," she ordered. "If anyone sticks her, you answer to me." They scattered. Naira stepped down from the dais on wobbly legs and sank onto a chair by the window. The sea spread out beyond, gray-green and restless. Gaia sat on the arm of the chair, not bothering with propriety. "Overwhelmed?" she asked. "Yes," Naira admitted. "I feel like a net full of fish all pulling in different directions." Gaia smirked. "At least you upgraded from sea-touched ghost." Naira snorted. "Progress." She rubbed her palms on her skirt. "Everything's moving so fast," she whispered. "Yesterday, I was a problem the council didn't know what to do with. Today, I'm a queen they're pretending they always wanted. Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," Gaia said. "We put a crown on your stubborn head and dare anyone to call you a problem to your face." Naira bit her lip. "What if I fail?" she asked, voice small. "What if the vow made a mistake? What if I made a mistake? What if I stand there and the sea decides it picked the wrong girl and we both look like idiots in front of 4 kingdoms?" Gaia blinked. Then, to Naira's utter shock, she laughed. "Naira," she said, "you argued with an ocean and won. If anyone looks like an idiot, it's going to be the people who thought they could still scare you with side-eye." Naira's cheeks burned. "I didn't win. We compromised." "That's worse," Gaia said. "Do you know how hard it is to get a stubborn thing to meet you in the middle? You're terrifying." Naira stared at her. Are you complimenting me? Don't get used to it, Gaia said quickly. It's bad for my brand. Naira's heart eased a little. A knock sounded. Enter, Gaia called. Saurin stepped in, wearing a tunic instead of his cloak, sleeves rolled up, looking more like a man than a legend for once. It did distressing things to Naira's lungs. Bad time? He asked, taking in the scattered fabric, the pins on the floor, Naira's dazed expression. Perfect time, Gaia said. I was just telling Naira she's terrifying, and I think you should support this message. Naira groaned. Please don't. Saurin's mouth curved. She is terrifying, he agreed easily. In the best ways. Naira put her face in her hands. I regret all of my life choices. Too late, Saurin said. You already yelled at a council and rewrote sea law. We're past the point of no return. Gaia slid off the chair arm. I'll leave you two to talk feelings or strategy or whatever it is you do when I'm not here to keep things efficient, she said. At the door, she paused. Naira? Yes? Gaia's gaze softened. You're going to be fine, she said. Terrifying, but fine. Naira's throat closed. Thank you, she whispered. Don't make me say it twice, Gaia warned, then swept out. Silence settled. Warmer now. Saurin crossed the room, stopping a respectful distance from Naira. How are you? He asked. It was the kind of question she was used to answering with a lie. She didn't. Scared, she said. And not as scared as I was. He nodded. That tracks. She studied him. How are you? His mouth twisted. Mildly horrified by my advisors, he said. They want to turn your coronation into a 3-day joint festival with my territories to cement the alliance. I told them I'd rather not accidentally start a riot by inviting my loudest uncles to critique your council's fashion choices in public. Naira barked a laugh. You have loud uncles? More than anyone needs, he said. We'll keep the first ceremony here mostly breeze mists. My people can handle a second, smaller one once you're not in danger of collapsing from too much reverence. Naira exhaled. One coronation at a time, please. Agreed, he said. She hesitated, then blurted, Are you sure about all this? He didn't ask what she meant. Yes, he said simply. You didn't even think about it, she protested. I've been thinking about it since the first time my wolves went silent when you walked into the square, he said. Since the first time I saw you stand under cruelty and not crumble. Since I watched you tell an ancient power that you would walk away rather than let it own you. His voice dropped. I'm sure. Naira's chest felt too tight again. You barely know me, she whispered. I know enough, he said. I know you talk to animals and listen to people. I know you apologize too quickly. I know you're braver than you think and kinder than most of this palace deserves. The rest, I want to learn. Over years, not days. Her eyes burned. You're allowed to be unsure, he added gently. Bond or no bond. Vow or no vow. You don't owe me certainty just because magic thinks we match. Naira laughed once, wet. Magic thinks we match. That's terrifying. We can prove it wrong, he said. If it is, we're not trapped. She searched his face, needing to see any hint of possessive entitlement. Any red flag she'd been trained to believe came with an alpha. She saw none, only steady patience, and something warmer he wasn't pushing on her. Her shoulders loosened. I don't want to prove it wrong, she admitted quietly. I just don't want to disappear into it. You won't, he said. I like you loud. Her cheeks flared. I'm not loud. Inside your head you are, he said. It's my favorite thing about you. She shook her head, flustered. Stop saying things like that. I have to go be regal soon. I can't do that with jelly for bones. He smiled, softer. I'll stop. For now. He reached into his pocket. I brought you something. Naira blinked. Already? You just survived a council. You didn't have to. He held out his hand. On his palm lay a small, smooth stone. Sea glass, worn nearly flat, the color of shallow water. A gold thread had been wrapped around it, forming a simple loop. I found it on your cliffs the first day I arrived. he said. I kept it. Didn't know why. Now I do. Naira picked it up carefully. It was cool to the touch at first, then warmed in her fingers. What is it for? She asked. Nothing, he said. It's just yours. Something that's beautiful because it's been through storms and still lets light through. Like you. Her breath hitched. She closed her fingers around the glass, feeling its small, solid weight. Thank you, she whispered. You're welcome, he said. Silence again. Comfortable somehow. Outside the window, gulls wheeled over the sea. One swooped close, peering in with unapologetic curiosity. Naira felt its attention like a small, bright poke in her mind. Well, the gull's impression seemed to say, this should be interesting. Naira huffed a laugh. What? Saurin asked. Nothing, she said. Just the world commenting. He chuckled. It's going to have opinions no matter what we do. We might as well give it a good show. Naira looked down at the sea glass in her hand, at the faint glow still humming under her skin, at the man in front of her who somehow made all of this feel less like a sentence and more like a beginning. For the first time since all of this started, the idea of standing in front of everyone didn't feel like walking to an execution. It felt like walking to a threshold. She tightened her fingers around the stone. All right, she said, more to herself than to him. All right, Saurin echoed. Beyond the glass, the sea rolled, steady and endless, waiting to see what its tide-marked daughter and her wolf king would do next. Breezemist had never been so quiet. Not during the great storms when wind howled between stone houses. Not during ancient executions the elders told in hushed voices. Not even when some ship returned splintered, bringing more absences than men. But that morning, the day the kingdom called the sea to witness, the silence was almost reverent. The palace square had been transformed. Deep blue and silver fabrics draped from balconies, rippling like waves trapped in cloth. Strings of shells and sea glass tinkled softly when the wind passed. Buckets of seawater had been placed at specific points, for the symbol, according to the ceremony masters. Naira felt the vow chuckle low inside them. She drew a deep breath in front of the tall mirror in her chambers. The dress Gaia had planned hugged her body like liquid midnight. Deep navy blue, heavy at the base but light in the upper layers, with a translucent silver veil stitched over it that moved at the slightest gesture. Fine gold threads edged the collar and cuffs, echoing the soft lines of light that still appeared under her skin when the sea's will murmured louder. The tailors had followed Gaia's order. Nothing to hide. Her tide skin reflected light in strange, beautiful ways, the golden veins like someone had drawn sun paths there. Her white salt hair was half braided simply, the rest loose in waves, with only a few discreet pearls, not to pretend she was anything other than herself. Naira smoothed her palms down the front, heart hammering. Gaia stood behind her, adjusting one last pin. Perfect, she said, voice steady, but eyes bright. You look like the sea decided to wear silk. Naira met her gaze in the mirror. You did this. We did, Gaia corrected. I only made it look good. A knock sounded. Time. Saurin called from the hall, voice muffled but calm. Gaia squeezed Naira's shoulder. Go be terrifying, she said. I'll be right behind you. Naira nodded, throat tight. She stepped out. Saurin waited in the corridor, dressed in dark gray with silver accents. Simple, regal, wolf at his core. His eyes swept her once, and something like wonder flashed there before he controlled it. You look, he exhaled, like you were always meant to. Naira's cheeks warmed. You look like you belong in a storm. He offered his arm. Then let's go make one. They walked to the square together, Naira's heels clicking on stone. At the threshold, wolves waited. 6 of them, massive and serene, eyes bright as moonlight. They fell into place around her as she stepped out, not caging her, but framing her like living honor guards. The crowd inhaled as one. Naira felt every gaze. She lifted her chin. The square was packed edge to edge, faces from every corner of Breezemist. Fishermen in oilcloth, nobles in silk. Marla front and center with her arms crossed, Perrin waving wildly from his father's perch up on a guard post. Gaia walked just behind, carrying the velvet cushion with the crown, pearl and shell and a single band of gold, simple but ancient. Naira climbed the dais steps, wolves at her heels. The High Herald waited at the top, scroll in hand. His voice boomed out the old words, but they felt different now, spoken to her instead of over her. Naira of Breezemist, marked by the sea's vow, chosen by the living world. Do you accept the crown and the weight it carries? I do, Naira said, voice clear. As partner, not prisoner. A murmur swept the crowd. Saurin stepped forward, taking the crown from Gaia. Their eyes met, sister to sister, a flash of something raw and real. Gaia nodded, tiny, approving. Saurin lifted the crown. As it settled on Naira's head, the world changed. The buckets of seawater around the square stirred. Water rose, not crashing, but spiraling upward in delicate columns, twisting like living smoke, catching sunlight into rainbows. The spirals danced around the dais, brushing Naira's dress without wetting it, then flowed back to their buckets, calm. The crowd gasped. Naira's skin glowed softly, golden veins bright under pearl gray, visible to every eye. From the gilded henpen, one perfect cluck cut the silence. Yawn. We knew she'd nail it. Laughter rippled through the square, tension breaking. Naira's gaze swept the crowd. There, in the noble section, stood Lady Vespera, the courtier who had, as a girl, called Naira ill omen, and refused to share a table with her at feasts. Now Vespera's face was pale, eyes wide. Vespera stepped forward, voice trembling. Your Majesty, I was wrong. So wrong. Forgive me? Naira met her eyes. Forgiveness isn't mine to give cheaply, she said gently, but understanding, that I can offer. Go home, Lady Vespera. Tell your children what you saw today. Vespera bowed, swallowing pride, and retreated. Marla lifted her fist in salute from the front. Naira nodded back, heart full. Perrin waved both arms wildly. Naira smiled and waved small. Saurin took her hand. Naira, he said, voice for the square but eyes for her alone. I vow to listen when you speak for the world, to stand beside you, not before or behind, to choose you every dawn, not because fate demands, but because I want to. Naira's throat closed. Saurin, she said, I vow to meet you as partner, to speak my truth without apology, to choose you because you see me whole, not in pieces. The water in the buckets shimmered, content. The vow hummed inside her, calm, supportive, no longer pulling. The High Herald raised his arms. Long live Queen Naira, Tide's partner. The square erupted, not in perfect unison, but real, ragged cheers rising from docks and nobles alike. Naira looked to the sea. The waves rolled steady, waiting ended. She was home. 6 months after the crown settled on her head, Naira's life still felt like learning to walk on shifting sand. The first council as queen had been a trial by boredom. Elder Ruvan had tested her immediately, droning for 40 minutes about traditional port fees that conveniently squeezed the lower docks hardest. Naira had listened, fingers steepled, until he finished. Then she stood. Elder Ruvan, she said calmly, let's visit the docks together. We can ask the fishermen how your tradition affects their families. Ruvan had sputtered. The others had exchanged glances. Marla had been there when they arrived, arms crossed. Tell him about the winter you almost lost the whole fleet, old man, she'd said. Ruvan had left looking thoughtful, and the fees changed. Naira learned fast. Authority wasn't volume. It was follow-through. That afternoon, Gaia swept into Naira's solar, scrolls under one arm, expression triumphant. I've decided, she announced. Naira looked up from dock reports. On what? My title, Gaia said. Not queen, that's yours, but mistress of relations, embajadora da corte. I handle the nobles, the visiting dignitaries, the endless small talk that makes people forget they hate each other. You handle the sea and the wolves. We divide and conquer. Naira blinked. You want to Work with me? Gaia rolled her eyes. Don't look so shocked. I'm good at smiling while plotting. You're good at making ancient forces behave. It's a perfect match. She paused. Besides, I'd get bored without something to do. Naira smiled. Mistress of relations it is? Later, alone with Saurin on the cliff walk, Naira leaned against him. Where do we live? She asked. Your lands? Here? Saurin kissed her temple. Wherever you choose. Half the year here, half in the wolf territories. Or we build something new between. Your call. Naira exhaled. Between sounds right. He nodded. Between. That evening, Naira slipped down to the meeting of tides alone. Saurin waited above, trusting her space. The pool glowed soft when she arrived. She knelt. We're partners now, she said. No more hiding. No more threats. Balance. The water lapped. Content. Upstairs, a knock. Naira climbed back to find an older woman at her door. Silver hair, sharp eyes, terrifying smile. Queen Naira, the woman said. I'm Alara Vale, Saurin's mother. I hear you made the sea behave. Naira straightened. I asked nicely. It listened. Alara's eyes gleamed. Most don't try nicely with primordial forces. Sit. Tell me everything. Naira sat. Told. Held her ground when Alara probed. At the end, Alara nodded. You'll do, she said. Welcome to the family. The next day, Naira walked the docks. Children ran to her. Perrin front and center, waving a drawing of a glowing queen with wolves. You talk to gulls, he yelled. Sometimes, Naira laughed, kneeling. What do they say? They say you're awesome. Marla clapped her on the back. Told you they'd come around. Evening fell. Naira and Gaia sat in their old childhood room, window open to the sea. You kept the honey cake tin, Naira noted. Gaia shrugged. Sentiment. She paused. I'm sorry, for the square. For all of it. Naira squeezed her hand. I know. And thank you. For seeing me, even when you tried not to. Gaia's throat bobbed. Don't get mushy. Mistress of Relations doesn't do tears. Naira smiled. Deal. Night deepened. Naira stood alone on the balcony, sea glass pendant around her neck. Waves rolled below, steady. Saurin appeared silently, standing beside her. No words, just presence. Naira leaned into him, pendant warm in her fingers. The vow hummed soft, content. The sea sang low. For the first time, the ice had turned to sea. And Naira swam. The end. Epilogue 1 year later. The boy had storm-gray eyes and skin pearled like his mother's. Naira held him in her arms, sitting by the window ledge, the sea beyond shimmering under the morning sun. Little Ernesto Vale, a name chosen by Gaia, who insisted that someone in this family needs to have a normal name, slept against her chest, small and warm and perfect. Saurin entered silently, stopped in the doorway. You're glowing, he observed. Naira looked at her own arms. The golden veins pulsed softly, reflecting on the baby's face. He likes the sea, she whispered. Whenever the waves crash harder, he wakes up. Saurin crossed the room, sat beside her, ran a light finger over their son's cheek. He's beautiful. Takes after his father. Takes after the mother who stopped hiding. Naira rested her head on his shoulder. The three of them there, in the morning light, the sound of gulls beyond. 2 months, she said. Should we take him to meet the meeting of tides? Saurin kissed her hair. Whenever you want. Outside, the sea sighed against the cliffs. Calm, content. As if finally everything was exactly where it should be. Dear reader, did you enjoy Naira's journey? Who was your favorite character? Comment below. I read all the comments, and for those of you who stayed until the end, leave Nard Tide Rises in the comments. That will be our code. And so I know you were with me until the end. A big hug. You are the reason I write every day. With love, Maggie Reed.